Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff this week on the show. Just kind of a fun, laid-back episode. We've got some news about the sort of state of movie theaters during the pandemic. Multiple pieces of interesting Spider-Man news, including a look at Spider-Man Remastered, details on the new Smash Brothers character, who is from Minecraft. And we've got a good batch of listener mail because it was kind of a down week. We didn't have time to sort of prepare a bigger topic this week. So thank you guys for writing in. We always enjoy doing some listener mail. If you ever want to send that in unsolicited, you are welcome to tweet at me or email the show or whatever. Or tweet at Sean. He's on Twitter less, but you can do that too.
Yeah, I will definitely see it. I check Twitter. I just rarely make tweets.
Right. Yeah. And he has the fun Hatsune Miku avatar, so it's unmissable when it's Sean. Yeah. All right. So, Sean, how have you been?
I've been pretty good. It was a pretty slow. I feel like I'm getting into the habit of how the schedule is working. It's still hellish, but you can get used to hell, I guess. You know, you can get used to anything eventually. Although that's been
the lesson of 2020.
Yes, yeah, it has been the lesson of 2020 for sure. We do have parent-teacher conferences that are fully remote in 2 weeks, and that is utterly terrifying to me to talk to a bunch of parents for the people I don't know over Zoom for the first time. That's just not a good way to talk to someone that you don't already have a rapport with.
It sounds like they found a way to make parent-teacher conferences worse, which I didn't think were possible.
Yeah, no, so I'm not looking forward to that. But I have played a new video game. I have a thing that I can talk about for stuff, and that I have played.
Oh, yay.
Genshin Impact, which is the new open world Breath of the Wild-esque RPG that is also a gacha game that is free to play out of China. So I have stuff that I can talk about on the podcast for the first time in a month.
Well, fun. I'm excited to hear about that. I've played a new game, too. It's called Hades, which is a big sensation right now. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'm guessing we're both early into these games. But
yeah, I only started playing last night, but it is cool. Yeah.
Neat. I've been curious about that. So that's the stuff going on. One thing I will say, Sean, about Zoom parent-teacher conferences is if a kid does not want their parent to talk to their teacher, it is easier to sabotage this way because all you have to do is unplug the router. Mm-hmm. And your parents, they won't know. This, fuck it. Although I guess the parents of the kids you teach are younger and know how the internet works, but it depends.
No. I mean, it's, I think the thing you learn is that just people don't know how technology works, generally speaking. And I think it kind of has almost nothing to do with age. Stereotype, I think, has to slowly start moving out because people are only familiar with the technology that they use, and most people only use their smartphones. And so
that's a good point.
My general experience has been young parents, old parents, teenagers, young teachers, old teachers. Most people just don't know what the fuck they're doing with technology, which sucks to be the person that does know what to do with technology when you're in the middle of all this shit, because I'm your one-stop shop for any random tech bullshit you need help with. I get a lot of that. I'm getting a lot of that from all corners right now on the job.
I would hide it a little bit, Sean. I would maybe pretend that you're not as good with technology as you are.
It's too late. Everyone knows out of the teacher that plays the video games, and so they're like, well, that guy knows how to play video games, so he has to know how the internet works.
Yeah, I guess that's true. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. Let's do some stuff, Sean. And speaking of school, my one big, nothing new is going on with, COVID stuff here. We're kind of chugging along. Something new is about to happen because we're above 2,000 cases in the student body, and Governor Kim Reynolds is about to order that all the bars can reopen. So, it's a great time. We have slowed the caseload, in part because the bars are closed. And it's about to be winter when people can't congregate outside. It's already getting cold here. Yesterday it was 60 degrees, which nice enough to go take a walk, but a little nippy, and we're about to reopen the bars. So I am not going to be teaching in person for the rest of this semester. I will not be going on campus as long as bars are open because you cannot trust anyone. I'm sorry. Yeah. Anyway, but I do have one story, Sean, which is it's been a while on the Weekly Stuff podcast since we got to do a segment where I talk about a movie I saw for film school that made me want to kill myself.
Great.
But do you want to do a segment on that, Sean?
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite things, just like even outside of the podcast, just because you didn't used to do it on the podcast. It used to just be you like venting about the bullshit you saw when we were in the condo together at Boulder.
Yeah.
So it's been a while since I heard you talk about a movie like the fucking and eating people movie. That I enjoy this. It gives me an insight into a world that I rarely step into.
Yeah, this is in the Hall of Fame with the fucking and eating people movie of like movies that made me want to go back in time and kill Thomas Edison before he invented the movie camera.
Also because he was a dick. So if you're going to kill someone, might as well take out old Tommy.
Well, and you could kill Thomas Edison like before he killed all those elephants in those experiments. And still the Lumiere brothers would have you covered. They would invent the camera, and they killed no elephants. So
exactly.
you'd be good. They just frightened some old people with a film of a train coming towards the camera, which, is funny, so that's fine. Okay, so I had to watch for my intro to film. So I am not in any classes right now. I'm at that point in my PhD where I am studying for exams and stuff, but I am not taking classes as a student. But I do still teach. It's part of my appointment. It's how I make the big dollars that they pay me. Is I TA. But I am TAing for someone I have not taught for before. Great guy. It's a fun class. But I'm just going to say his taste in film was a little different than mine. And he has a lot of stuff on the syllabus that I had not seen before. So one of the films was for this week on editing. We watched a 2008 movie by a director named Adam Agoyan called Adoration. And it's from 2008. It's very obscure. You probably haven't heard about it. But I'm going to try to tell you, Sean, what the plot of Adoration is, because this has been a fun part of my week where I watched the movie. I hated it. I was later, Thomas, my brother, and I were playing Smash Bros. Online, and we were talking. And I said I hated this movie. It's like, well, what was it about? And I realized explaining what this movie is about makes me sound like a raving lunatic on the side of a street corner. And so I want to do that for you and the listeners here, Sean. So this movie Adoration starts, there's this kid. I don't remember any of the names. I'm going to be clear on that. I don't care enough. So there's just going to be vague descriptions of these characters. But there's this kid, he's like 15. It's like one of the students you teach, Sean. And he's in his French class. And his French teacher sees him like writing an essay that we assume would be something to do with French, but it's not. And she is impressed by it and has him present like this monologue to the class. And he is monologuing, not in French, it's in English. It's very unclear why he would be doing this in his French class, but he is telling basically his life story, not his life story, but the life story of his mother and father who are dead. He is an orphan, and he lives with his uncle. But he's telling the story of like what happened with his mother and father, and there was this big scandal, and they're dead. And the story is about how the dad, who was a like Arabic Muslim, became a terrorist and convinced the mom when she was pregnant with the kid to go on a plane with a bomb. And then at some point the dad dies and the mom dies, but the kid lives. So this is the story he's telling, and it's like shocking to everyone because it's like, oh my God, there was this terrorist and a bomb almost went off on a plane and killed all these people. And he's telling this story. And like that's the framing device for the entire film, and there's like reenactments, of like what he's talking about and stuff. But the story's not true. He's just making it up and bullshitting everyone. And to add to this, the French teacher knows it's not true. The French teacher is also the drama teacher, which I don't think that's a thing anywhere, but okay. The French teacher is also the drama teacher.
Definitely not a thing anywhere. You would not have a teacher who's both a foreign language teacher and a theater teacher. It's just not a thing.
Yeah. Okay, so she's the French teacher and she's the drama teacher. The kid, the main character, is not in drama club, but he sometimes hangs out by the drama club, and she's trying to get him to do drama stuff, but he doesn't want to do drama stuff. So she convinces him to do this like acting exercise, but only in front of the French class. Even though, again, he's not doing it in French, I can't stress that enough. She is just like wasting her entire class's time. But she convinces this kid to do this story where he is lying in front of his French class as like a drama exercise. And already, this is an idea for a movie, Sean, so bad that I don't think there's any version of this that works. that is like such a, like, the kid is such a like cruel pathological liar at this point, and like over the course of the movie his story like goes viral, and he's on all these, like, it wouldn't be Zoom because this is 2008, but something like Zoom calls where he has all these, like, first it's friends and then it's all these random people, and at first like his friends are mad that they never told them his father was a terrorist, and then it's all these like random people who were like connected to the actual terrorist incident that he is claiming as his own, and like being outraged by this on like the Zoom call, but like he's tricking all of them, they don't know it's real. And so like already this is like, have you heard, Sean, about the movie The Book of Henry?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I have not seen it.
Yeah, it's like one of the most famous bad movies of the last few years. It was the movie Colin Trevorrow made after Jurassic World that was so bad Kathleen Kennedy fired him from Star Wars. But like, if you, I've seen a lot of good comments about the Book of Henry, that like that movie, which is about a boy genius who plans to murder his neighbor, is such a bad idea for a movie. There just could not be a good version of that movie, and it's poorly made. And this movie Adoration is the same way. Like, that is such a bonkers, off-the-wall, stupid idea for a movie. I don't think there can be a good version of it. And I'm not even scratching the surface of the story here yet, Sean, because as the movie goes along, we learn the actual story of the boy's mother and father, which is that they were the mother was a white, like, Christian woman, and the father was a, like, Arabic Muslim, but he wasn't a terrorist, he was just a normal, nice guy, like most Muslims are. And they get together, but her dad was a bigot who hated Muslims, and this is like 2008, like Bush years stuff.
Yeah.
And so what actually happened is that there was a significant strain on their relationship because the dad was a giant fucking bigot. And one night they're over, like, after the main character has been born but is a baby, and he's with the uncle who winds up raising him later. There's this like fight at the house where the dad is like really mad about his daughter marrying a Muslim, even though it's like they've been married for years at this point. I don't know why they're still like hanging out with the dad. I feel like you would just cut that person out of your life, but for some reason they're still doing it. And so then they like leave the house, but the mother and father are like all distracted because of the bigotry, and so they crash into a bus and die. And that's what actually happened. And so the boy is like translating his pain through this story where he is lying and pretending his dad was a terrorist to like process this. But I'm not to the craziest part. The craziest part is that the French teacher, who is also the drama teacher, who is colluding with this kid to like lie to the world, and also in several scenes of the movie dresses up in like a burqa and a like face mask, like a Muslim kind of like traditional face garb, and she will like go around the house where his uncle lives and for some reason just say a bunch of like not like violent or hateful but very bizarre anti-Semitic things because the uncle is Jewish and is like trying to get a rise out of him, also as a dramatic exercise, we learn later. That French teacher was also the boy's dad's ex-wife, who the dad left for to marry the mother who gave birth to the kid. And that's why she is like stalking this family and getting engaged in all their affairs.
This is like the thing that with a lot of these movies that you end up telling me about is that they have like the most soap opera ass fucking plot underneath everything, but it sounds like my assumption is the way that the movie presents the story is not in that way, right? It's trying to be like, this is so far above melodrama, but when you break down what the story is doing, the plot is just absolutely like Victorian melodrama style bullshit.
Exactly. And no, there is not a hint of humor in this movie. It is taking itself as seriously as it is possible to take something, but the acting is just terrible and amateurish, like some of the worst I've ever seen in a movie, like kind of like The Room or something, but The Room is funny, but it's like they're acting like they're doing Shakespeare. The writing is just awful. It's like none of this sounds like something anyone would ever say in the English language. It is so poorly constructed as writing, and I think that's part of why the acting is so bad. I think the cinematography is like flat and looks like a porno. The editing is kind of interesting in that it's like mixing all these kind of timelines and stuff together, but suffice it to say, I would not have chosen it to teach for editing. But, like, yeah, this was one of those movies, Sean, that is, like, nails on a fucking chalkboard. I barely could get through it. You know, it has these like racial themes, and it's sort of like about anti-Muslim bigotry, but it is in such a, like a lot of these movies I explained to you, Sean, in such a like hackneyed soap opera plot that is unaware of its own ludicrousness, that there's nothing you can take seriously out of it. And yeah, it's the last one that did this to me was, I think, a year or two ago. It was a French movie I talked about on here called Going Places, and that movie is on my Mount Rushmore. Is like Going Places, the fucking and eating people movie, probably this, and then I'd have to think of all the other bad ones I've seen. What else is on the Mount Rushmore of movies that make me want to go back in time and kill Thomas Edison? But yeah, it was God, and I do realize, like, the older I get, the less tolerance I have for this bullshit, even more than I did, I feel like, as an undergrad. Like, and it depends. Like, so some of the stuff I hated as an undergrad, I've come to love, but it also means the stuff I really hate, I really well and truly, like, have no patience for.
Yeah, I mean, once you've experienced enough of that kind of thing, it's like you know what you're in for, right? It's like you've seen enough of the, like, the bullshit, artsy, like, up its own ass, doesn't really understand what it's doing kind of movies. That, yeah, I can imagine you would at some point just not have much tolerance for it anymore.
No, because I think it's pretty easy to separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to movies that have something to say and say it interestingly, and movies that think they have something to say but are really so far up their own ass they're coming out their own mouth. So yeah. Anyway, that was my fun. Yeah. Why was he giving a speech in French class in English? This is the one that will, like, I don't know, Sean, if you were walking around the halls of your school, like you had a free period, and you walked, like, let's say you had a buddy who was teaching French, and you walked in and your buddy was just having kids give monologues in English in French class, you'd probably be a little weirded out. Like, why are you wasting everyone's time with this?
I would be a little bit confused, but I mean, your description of the movie makes it sound like it is the worst teacher ever, who is, like, secretly manipulating all this bullshit behind the scenes because she's in a love affair with her student's dad, and it sounds like this French teacher has a lot more problems than her, educational practices that she's using in the classroom.
That is very true. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on. Do you want to tell us about Genshin Impact? I've been curious about this. I haven't played it yet. I think it's on PS4, right?
Yeah, it's on everything. I'm pretty sure there's even a mobile version of it, although I have not downloaded that to see what it's like. So this is probably going to be a long way to... I think this game is going to be hard to explain, so you might want to buckle in for me to describe everything going on around this game, because it's a lot. So Genshin Impact is a game developed in Japan by a studio it's the same studio that made Honkai Impact, which is a series of mobile games that are pretty popular and well received, like mostly in the Asian market. The studio is called MiHoYo, and so it's a Chinese studio. This is the first game they've made that is released on PC and consoles, and it is a game that is heavily inspired by a lot of different things that it brings together to make something that, so far, I've played maybe 4 or 5 hours of it, which does not feel like a lot in the scope of, like, what the game is doing. So far, it feels like what it is producing, it feels fairly unique, even though you can really clearly see the influences. So the most major influence is Breath of the Wild is very obvious. The first way that people maybe have encountered this game is a couple of years ago when it was first announced. It was announced, I want to say, like 6 months or something after Breath of the Wild came out, sometime in that sort of time frame. And it was very clear, okay, this is like, they are just making a Breath of the Wild clone. It has a similar sort of art style. It's way more anime-y than Zelda, but it has a very similar color palette. So on first blush, it looks a lot like Zelda. I think once you play a bit more of it, you see that the aesthetic is more like a Sword Art Online or some other kind of fairly generic modern anime fantasy thing they're doing. But it certainly looks fairly like Breath of the Wild. It has the, like, you can climb on everything kind of mechanic, with the stamina bar and all of that. It has a wind glider type mechanic. It has some of the similar physics sorts of things, although ultimately it executes it in a very different way. But it has a, like when you set something on fire, all the grass lights on fire. It creates like updrafts so you can glide. There's cooking, and the cooking is fairly similar. It just, on first blush, it has a lot of very clear similarities to Breath of the Wild. ultimately the game I don't think is actually that similar to Breath of the Wild, other than some of that feeling of exploring around the world, like climbing on whatever you want, seeing a chest off in the distance. It is very much you go by sight lines in terms of how you navigate the open world of the game rather than placing waypoints in that kind of thing. So it follows a little bit of Breath of the Wild's design in that respect. Some of the other influences on the game are Nier Automata. There's a very clear inspiration there in terms of how some of the combat feels and specifically some of the combat animations, I think maybe are almost like ripped out of Nier Automata. There's some of them that specifically any of the animations of the game of your character going from an attack animation back to their neutral animation. That Nier Automata has some incredibly fluid and like unique animations for each attack going back to their neutral pose. All of those are like feel almost identical in Genshin Impact. This is the whole thing where the weapon floats behind the character, and when you attack, it like summons into their hand. And some of the floatiness of the dodge and stuff like that is clearly inspired by some of the combat stuff in Nier Automata. And then around all of that, the game is also a gacha game, meaning that it is you get a bunch of different kinds of currency, some of which, if you want to pay money, you can buy a paid currency. Then that is used to buy into basically a gacha or a roulette style system where you get a random assortment of different items and characters. So there are different unlockable characters in the game that you get through a gacha style system, which that is the thing that is the most interesting thing about Genshin Impact to me, is that it is a gacha game. Like, it has all of the different trappings of like daily login bonuses and these different kinds of currency systems and the way that characters level up, and you have these items that you feed them that level them up. And I assume if you get duplicates of the same character, you can fuse them together to unlock specific things. Every character has a bunch of different ways that they level up based on different materials you feed them or XP they get, or again, if you combine them with different stuff. Same way with how you level up weapons is a very gacha style system, and you like hit a certain limit and then you're going to have to get specific materials to increase the level cap. The characters are rated on a star system from 1 to 5. There's so much in the game of a gacha style mechanics, but I've never seen those style mechanics fused or like put onto a AAA open world RPG style game. It's always a turn-based or like very light action kind of thing, like Dragon Ball Legends, which I've played a lot of, or Fate Grand Order, which is a gacha game I've played a little bit of, or like Grand Blue is another really popular gacha game out there. And so it has a lot of those kinds of mechanics in terms of leveling up characters. But it doesn't look like it's going to be a game that has that stuff on the surface, which is interesting. So if you're someone who's never played a gacha game, I think Genshin Impact would be an interesting game to play if you don't have the context for a lot of the systems around it that have a long tradition in the mobile market, but have very little, like you just don't encounter it almost ever in like the console or PC game space. It's an interesting sort of way to get a different audience into those same kinds of hooks that you have in a gacha game. It is, and I have been having a really good time with it so far. It is fairly confusing at first because it throws a huge amount at you, because gacha games are by their very nature very complex, because there are a lot of different systems and currencies that exist there to create a grind, because they obviously exist to keep you coming back for more and more and more to get people to spend money on them. And then this kind of open world AAA RPG style game also is very complex by its very nature. So when you put both of those things together, it was a lot of confusing menus and not really knowing what to do. And so for people playing the game for the first time, because again, it's free to play. So if you have a PS4 or a PC or a mobile device that would support it, like you can just play this game. I would highly recommend just going by the critical path for a while, because I tried to go off the beaten path early on and got very confused. So just stick to the main quest line until you kind of get your bearings. But once I did, and I did my first like gacha pull, which you basically get enough currency early on, as is typical with these games, to get your first like roll of the roulette basically. And I got a bunch of characters, and I had all my characters in my party. And once I had that, the game really opened up to me. And that what it is doing with having this kind of Breath of the Wild feel to a lot of it, but then putting an incredibly systems heavy and very video gamey style thing onto it like a gacha, it creates a Breath of the Wild that is way more of a video game to me, which is fun because it kind of fixes, for me personally, some of the stuff that I felt kind of lacking in Breath of the Wild. I'm getting more from Genshin Impact in terms of there's way more variety in terms of what you can do in combat. You can switch between your four characters more or less instantly. So you're basically juggling four characters that each have different abilities fast enough that their abilities effectively synergize just with you playing it on your own. You can play with other people like co-op, but even on your own, you can synergize abilities together through the elemental system. So you know how Breath of the Wild had its sort of elemental stuff where the elemental effects affected the environment, like fire lighting stuff on fire or ice freezing water, that kind of stuff. Genshin Impact has similar systems in it, but they're more, it's kind of combined some of that physical elemental stuff from Breath of the Wild with the kind of video gamey elemental stuff in a BioShock or something like that, where you're combining elements together to get different effects. And that has been some of the stuff that's been really fascinating, is like switching to my character who is like a fire-based archer type character, using her abilities to set like this whole area on fire, then switching to my main character who has his elemental ability is wind, and he creates this like vortex ball thing that he shoots at them. And if you combine fire and wind together, it just makes this huge kind of fire tornado that spreads the fire effect like really far, and does this massive AoE style attack. Or if they're enemies that have like the wet status effect. So if they're standing in water or it's raining, or you can do different things that like make them wet. If you hit those enemies with a lightning style attack, they then take a like damage over time style effect. And so you can see, as I started playing the game, I could see, oh, there's a lot of depth here in terms of switching between different characters, using different things in the environment, whether or not there's a torch over here that can naturally give a fire style effect, or we're standing near a lake that I can then freeze, and that kind of stuff. Like it has a really rewarding system that I think gels and synergizes really well with the gacha style get different characters, because each character feels fairly unique and plays well. I've only played for like 5 hours, so I'm at the very beginning of this stuff and only kind of starting to experiment with it. But playing it quite a bit this morning, I feel like the game opened up so much to me, with me kind of seeing, oh, this is what this game is. Like just running around this big open world, finding different chests and things to do and their quests and stuff like that. But just like, it's so much fun to just come upon a random group of enemies and see what elemental type the enemies are, what environment they're in, and switch between my different characters and juggle all their abilities and just create giant fire tornadoes and explosions of lightning, and everything's like fucking freezing over here, and things are getting like knocked away in the wind over here. The elemental system is incredibly fun, and I've been having a really great time experimenting with the combat in a way that I was very surprised by. I don't know, it feels like it has quite a bit of depth to it, as well as having the exploration focused open world type stuff that a Breath of the Wild has.
That's all really interesting. I mean, I've been curious about this game and thinking about playing it. And now that I've heard you talk about it, I might do that. I just looked it up, by the way, and it is on Windows and PS4 and then iOS and Android. So it's not on Xbox or Switch right now, although they are working on a Switch version apparently. But I just downloaded the installer on my PC here, so I can maybe take a look at it later, because that does sound interesting. I mean, it is like, I'll say you put it together more smoothly for me, Sean, than I'd read a couple of articles and could not come away with like, what is this? Because I would read the articles and see the pictures, and I'm like, so it's Breath of the Wild with gacha? I don't even know what that means. So thank you for like going in depth, because I do understand that more, and it sounds like something worth trying. And I didn't know it had co-op. That sounds fun too. Because this sounds like something like my brother would enjoy, and we've been looking for something to play together. So that sounds interesting.
It does have multiple different language options, and I did play it for a little bit in Chinese. I ultimately switched it. You can switch it to the Japanese language option, and I did that because the game is, it is so anime. Like, it is very specifically pulling from like the last 5 to 6 years of fantasy anime that's specifically is what is called the isekai genre, or like the parallel world genre, which is popularized by Sword Art Online. Like, it is that kind of like, there is a lot of like fantasy style lore, but as is typical with a lot of like modern anime fantasy, the lore feels fairly like it is there, and there probably is a lot of depth there if you like really want to look at it, but it mostly feels like it's there for characters to be able to say stuff that sounds very cool and like epic in this high fantasy way without actually like diving into it. So if you're someone who, because I didn't particularly take to the English voice acting, so if you're someone that does not like that style of English voice acting, that's very anime dub style English voice acting, you can switch it to either Chinese or Japanese. The Japanese voice cast is very good. They've got a bunch of like kind of big name voice actors.
Yeah, it looks like they had some stars in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they want this to be big in Japan too.
Yeah, I think it's because, I mean, for fuck's sake, their like company logo has like the word otaku, like it's just written under the logo for MiHoYo. So it's very clear the influences. While it is a Chinese game, it is clear that these people are some anime fucking nerds. Tech otaku save the world. That is the phrase that exists underneath the logo for the development studio MiHoYo. So they are some anime fuckers. So if you like anime, this game has a lot of anime in it for sure. It does have, I think generally the story and dialogue translation stuff is pretty well done. I think some of the English language translation stuff is maybe a little bit too like cutesy in terms of all the elemental stuff has like a special name. So instead of it being fire, it's pyro. Instead of it being water, it's aqua. Earth is geo. And that is generally fine. Wind magic is called like Anemo or something that I'm like, this is just a bullshit name you're just kind of making up. I wish it was just called what it was, which is in Japanese, it's just called, it's fire magic and it's wind magic, and they don't have kind of fancy names for it. One area of the translation that is very weird, and I think this extends with a lot of like the menu stuff, is the menus are I think overly complicated. They have a lot of stuff they stuff into the menu, so it's going to be complicated no matter what. It's a very kind of weird menu system. But also the translations in the menus feel weird. Specifically, when I went in to switch my y-axis to inverted, I went and I switched invert y-axis option from close, and I switched it to open. So instead of it being on and off, it's open and close. I have no idea how that got in there. That is such a bizarre label I've never seen in a menu before, to say that, oh, I want this option in the menu to be open as opposed to closed. I want my invert y-axis opened up. I don't know what the fuck that's supposed to mean. It feels weird. I don't know. Again, the translation of the rest of the game mostly feels really good. I just found it very funny that somehow got in there and they didn't make it on-off like every other video game.
Yeah. Interesting. That sounds funny. And you've seen all the invert menus because you're someone who does that on all the games. So, yes.
But that is true of all the menu options. Anything that would be on or off is called open or close. So go in there knowing that open means on and close means off.
Well, yeah, you open the option and you take the option out, and you close the option, you put it back in the box. There, exactly. It's a very visual thing. Now, that sounds interesting. Should I talk about the game I've been playing?
Yeah, what have you been playing, Jonathan?
So I am also early in this game. I've played maybe 5 hours, and it's a big game, but I am head over heels in love with it, and this is Hades, which is the new game from Supergiant. Supergiant made Bastion, Transistor, Pyre. I think like all of their games have been major critical darlings, I think we could say. And Hades has been in early access since late 2018, but it came out as like a full finished game this week. It released the full 1.0 version on PC and then also on Nintendo Switch. I think it's coming to other stuff. I don't think it's on everything else yet.
No, it's not.
No, yeah. But you can at least play it on Switch or PC, and I would imagine it's a game that most PCs could run if you don't have a Switch. But it is a phenomenal game. Like a lot of the game critics I follow, like Patrick Klepek at Vice, Jason Schreier, pretty much everyone, like anyone who writes about games has been talking about Hades. And so I had actually bought it a couple weeks ago when it came out on Switch because it was on sale for, I think it's usually a $25 game, and they had it for $20. So I picked it up when it came out, and then I was waiting to kind of wind down my Mario adventures, and I finished Mario Galaxy this week in the 3D collection. So I decided to start Hades last night, and Hades is incredible. It is also complicated to explain, but I will say it is one of the best, like, paramount examples of unraveling a complex system for you in a way that feels very engaging and inviting. Like, there's no point where I feel overwhelmed or confused by what to do in Hades, but just explaining it is a little hard because it has no easy like there's no clear genre signifier for it. It is in some ways a roguelike, but it is very important to note that like that is as close as you can kind of get to a genre definition, but it's not exactly that. But the way Hades is set, as the title implies, in the Greek pantheon, and you are playing as Zagreus, the son of Hades. And Zagreus is in hell. He's in the underworld with Hades, and the game starts. Zagreus wants to get out, and he wants to get to Mount Olympus and join the gods. And so you start with your first kind of roguelike run where Zagreus is trying to get out, and it is roguelike in the basic structure of it is a series of chambers you move through, isometric perspective, also kind of very Diablo-esque in its perspective, and then your buttons have different moves that are assigned to them, and you have different weapons that do different things, but the buttons kind of have a similar thing they do every time. But you're going through these chambers. You usually have a couple of options from chamber to chamber. The order of chambers, and then the inside of the chambers is always randomly generated. So it's roguelike in that sense, and you are trying to get through up to Mount Olympus. And when you die the first time, you wind up back at the start of the underworld in the House of Hades. You basically always, when you die, you dissolve in a pool of blood, and then you come out of like the river Styx and come back into the House of Hades, and you start to see the story piece together that Zagreus and Hades have had kind of a falling out over the years. I don't exactly want to spoil where it's going, but Zagreus starts learning more about his own... Well, you find out in flashbacks as you play the game that Zagreus has learned more about his parentage, and that's why he wants to get out of the underworld. But you also meet all of the characters around there, and you start to explore the House of Hades, and it is like this regular area that grows as you play the game, and you meet different characters like Hypnos, the god of sleep. You have Achilles is there, and I really love the logic for Achilles being in the underworld, which is that he was sent to Elysium, but he felt very bored there because he could not fight, so he is in the underworld now, and he's the guy who has given you all your weapons, because he's Achilles. Nyx is there, and Nyx is apparently your mother, but there's more to it than that. So you have all these characters in the House of Hades. You have your own room you can explore. But the basic thing is you keep going into the dungeon to try to get out of the underworld. And every time you play, as you're going through the roguelike areas, the story is continuous. The story keeps going on, and it is very built to, obviously you're not going to finish the run on your first or 10th or 20th time. It's something that builds up, and you go in, and you get as far as you can, and you will eventually die, but you will have gotten a bunch of important things. So there's different, currencies, I guess you would say. You collect these keys, these chthonic keys. I learned the word... I am not, a huge expert on the Greek pantheon. I know kind of the basics, but I learned the word for the gods of the underworld is the chthonic gods. Mm-hmm. But anyway, you get the chthonic keys, and those, unlock your different weapons and stuff. You get these jewels that, give you your kind of stat boosts and your basic, leveling stuff. But one of the things I really love about the roguelike side of the game is that there's a bunch of ways where every run you do is super different, and it's not just the randomization of the rooms and their order. It's also one of the big things that happens is that you meet the different Olympic gods as you're going through, because they send messages down to the underworld to try to help Zagreus. And so you meet Zeus, Aphrodite, Poseidon, all of the big ones, Artemis, Hermes, all of these guys. And they all have different boons they give you, which are different, significant and, game-changing powers to your different basic moves. One of the ones I got earlier today that, completely changed how I played the game for that run was that anytime you took damage, if you pressed the dodge button, where it's just this dodge boost you do away, I shouldn't even say dodge, it's a boost run you do to the side, you would get back half of the damage you lost. And so that is not a regular power you have, but if you get it, and I forget which god gives you that one, but if you get this power, obviously it's going to completely change the way you play the game for that run, and there's a lot of these in the game, and you get more of these boons as you go through. So the roguelike side of it is impeccable and so fun to play, but what really does set it apart is the setting and the art and the way it uses the Greek pantheon, and how it is an ongoing, continuous story through the different runs. I don't really know what game I would compare it to. The closest thing I can think of is something like a Dark Souls, where like death is just the point of it, and you will die and go back, and that is a continuous part of the world, and people will comment on your death, and like every time you come back to the House of Hades, Hypnos is there to greet you, and he will like comment on what killed you, and you will have a conversation about it. And over time, like you create relationships. There's almost like a Persona-esque like leveling tree with all the characters that like you level up your affection for them, and they reveal more about themselves to you. So Achilles is my buddy, and I'm learning more about Achilles, and things like that. And it is this story about this guy Zagreus who is trying to get out of Hades. It is a Sisyphean task, which they bring to attention because Sisyphus is also someone you meet and get stuff from in the game. And it is a game about like learning. It is about failure through the act of like dying in a video game and respawning. And it does it as well or better than any game I've ever seen. And I am still like at the tip of the iceberg of it. I think there are like 7 areas in the main dungeon to like actually clear a full run. And I've gotten through a couple times the first one of those, Tartarus, and then I get through this to the second area, and I forget what it's called, but it's like the Lake of Fire area. So there's a bunch of magma that can kill you there. But it is fascinating. It is gorgeous. The art in this game is incredible. The like portraits of all the gods and the characters you meet are so fucking cool. I desperately want the art book for Hades. They need to put that out because the drawings are just incredible. All the environments you see are incredible. It is like ludicrously fun and addictive to play because it's always that like one more run thing. And it also feels like it deeply rewards your time because I have not yet done a run where I did not feel I made some kind of significant progress. There, like, even if I didn't get as far I got the time before, you're able to like collect stuff that back in the House of Hades will allow you to unlock things to make more progress the next time or just understand the systems better. It is such a cool game. It is something I cannot wait to play more of. I know it's already infamous for like being something that people have played for dozens of hours and are still discovering things in, and I believe it. It feels like from the very beginning that this is a big game with a lot to uncover, but it is not overwhelming in how it presents that to you, and it is just so engaging. So this is one of the games of the year probably, and I'm excited to see more of it because it's really cool.
Yeah, I really want to check it out at some point because it seems like I've played a little bit of every Supergiant game because most of them ended up on PS Plus, and I played Bastion back in the day, and none of their games really clicked for me ever. And it's because I feel like they had always really great like mood, and the story stuff was good, and the music was great. But I never particularly liked the way their games played. It seems like Hades is finally they like nailed that. Like they found they figured out like the game feel for that kind of like isometric action type game, which is what Bastion was. But Bastion always felt incredibly slow to me. And Hades looks really good. And I have not played a roguelike in a couple of years at this point. It's been a while since I dabbled in that genre, so I'll probably check it out eventually.
You should, and it plays incredibly. I have not played Supergiant's other games, so I can't compare it to that. But it is incredibly fun to play and just to experiment with all the moves and like the things you get. It is really engaging. And I would say if you're someone who's kind of scared off by the term roguelike, don't worry about that. That's not exactly what this game is. It is much more of a forward-moving narrative experience than I think people tend to associate with that genre. Even if it does have this mechanic of trying to get further and dying and going back in, it is a challenging and difficult game that I would not call punishing. Because it is something that it wants you to get better and make that progress. And it's a little different than like a Dark Souls. The main way you make that progress is getting better at it. There's a big component of that in Hades, but it's also like getting the stuff and finding the ways things work together. It's a little more RPG-ish in that way. So yeah, it's incredible. The whole time I've been playing it, I'm like, Sean would fucking love this. Just the Greek god stuff on its own. I know how much you like that. It does it so well. The game is fully voice acted, and the voice acting is incredible. It's so good. I love it. The way they depict Hades himself is great. I have to imagine was influenced by Dragon Ball Z and Enma because he is a big giant dude sitting at a desk with a bunch of paperwork and a line of spirits in front of him, and is like, it's like this very bureaucratic version of Hades, and I really like that.
Awesome. It sounds great.
Yeah. And the three-headed dog Cerberus is there, and you can pet him whenever you want. Cerberus is a good boy.
Yes, he is.
Yes. All right, so those are some games. Sean, do you want to do some news?
What's going on in the news, Jonathan?
Well, we're going to start with a piece about sort of the state of movie theaters. And we did get a listener mail question about that, so I've kind of put it here because we're going to talk about it here. Barry asked us, I'm interested in your take on the outlook for movie theater chains and the big tentpole model. We're probably in for another year of this, and I wonder if in 2022 there will be theater chains and another crop of blockbusters, or if we'll finally see a shift to cheaper films. So a lot of stuff going on there. Before we kind of address the meat of the question, I want to kind of go over some context why we're talking about that this week. Because this week, the new James Bond film, No Time to Die, was pushed back once again to April 2021. This is significant because this was the first 2020 film that moved off its original date because of the pandemic. It was supposed to come out April of this year. And in March 2020, when like everything shut down, they moved it to November. And then a lot of movies followed after that. But for No Time to Die, it was actually one of the more drastic pushes. A lot of movies were moving to like July and August. And No Time to Die said, nope, November. And partially because that's when James Bond movies usually come out. And I think a lot of people assumed, and I remember feeling like this, like, well, November's a long ways off. We're going to be over this by November, right? No. So they've moved it again. They've moved it to April. And this has kind of sent shockwaves. The big one is that because of this, this is from Variety. Variety reported that Cineworld, which is this big UK film chain that owns Regal Cinema here in the US, they are shuttering all of their theaters in the US, the UK, and Ireland, and that means all the Regal cinemas will be shutting down this week. Hopefully the theaters will reopen. They're not like giving up the spaces, but they are shutting down for the foreseeable future. They've not announced a time frame to come back. I think they're basically saying 2021. Obviously No Time to Die was going to be big in the US, but even bigger in the UK and Ireland. And so I think for it being a UK chain, this was sort of like the final nail in the coffin of like, no, nothing's happening in 2021 or 2020. The rest of the big releases for this year are basically in December. I think the only other big one between now and December is the Pixar movie Soul is still scheduled for Thanksgiving, but then everything else has been pushed to like the last week of the year. So like Wonder Woman, Dune, the new Poirot movie, the Murder on the Orient Express sequel, I forget what it's called.
Death on the Nile, is that the one they're doing?
Death on the Nile is the one they're doing. That is correct. But all of those have been pushed to like the last week of December before Christmas. We'll see. Probably not. And everyone's kind of putting their chips on maybe summer and late spring 2021 we can do this. We'll see. I think it's also notable that the two movies launched in September, Tenet came out in theaters, and Mulan came out on Disney+. Tenet completely bombed, and while we do not have major numbers on Mulan, it's clear it didn't do well. Disney has not been hyping it. There's been very little chatter about it other than the controversy over its China stuff on social media. It was not received well. Disney is not doing any other releases like it. So I think the question right now is, and this leads into Barry's question, is there even a way to release successfully a giant 200 million tentpole in the midst of a pandemic? Does the business model just fundamentally not work without a global theater network? I would say the answer is obviously yes at this point. These films are budgeted to be making $1 billion. You cannot do that at home. You cannot do that with half of the theaters shut down. You can't, frankly, do that with theaters where they are doing social distancing and closing every other row and only selling half capacity. It's just not going to work. And clearly, I think studios are kind of hurting around the idea of just delaying until they can actually do it safely. But at this point, who the hell knows? And the big question is, are the chains still going to be around when they come back?
Yeah, like that's the thing that I just have I can't even like understand. I think it's like such a huge problem. Like happens? Like, how do you, like, you can't just shut the sites down for a year and, like, let go all of your staff and be like, well, there's no anything here, and just say, like, we'll just hold on to this property for now. But like, can you just do that for a year or 2 years and then eventually be like, okay, now movies can happen again. Let's go in and fix it back up and rehire all of our staff, and like, because you're basically reopening a whole movie theater, like a whole fucking building after it's been out of use for a year plus. Like, that has to be pretty expensive. Like, I just don't know what are like the full scale of the consequences for the like physical buildings and like the people that run them if you're pushing that off again and again and again and again. Like, eventually you can't just keep on jerking those people around and say, oh, we'll do it next month, and the next month they can't, and they say, oh, we'll do it next month, and next month you can't. Eventually it just, like, you got to do something.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there is a good answer. I mean, the answer would be, and this is true of a lot of industries right now, if we had in the United States a functioning government, is you would pass like, this is like with bars and restaurants. People have done the research to know how much money it would cost to just pay bars and restaurants to stay closed. And by paying them to stay closed, I mean pay their rent and pay their employees. Just the basic not they're going to make a profit, but just make the basic operating costs back, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not a ton of money. It's a ton of money, like, for you and me. It's not for the U.S. government. It's, a couple $100 billion, which we can do. We can do that. And it is cheaper in the long run to do that and keep people employed and all of this stuff, right, than it would be to figure it out later, right? And you can do that with theaters, too. You could just do the theater bailout package, because this is not theaters' fault. They didn't do anything wrong here necessarily. I mean, I think the reopening in August, but, everyone was doing that. And you can just pay them to stay shut, and people will be safe and healthy, and there will be stability, and when the industry comes back, it can actually be an economic boon instead of a bunch of companies trying to claw their way out of years of losses, Mm-hmm. And that would be the answer. But that's not going to happen. It might happen in the new year if we have, like, a Biden presidency and a Democratic Senate, and, like, they're doing rescue packages. We'll see. It's not going to happen now. And it's a big question. I mean, Regal Cinema shutting down completely again. That's the big one. The 2 theaters near our house, Sean, in Golden, that's Regal.
Yep.
Yeah, it's AMC is the other biggest one in the U.S. It declared bankruptcy earlier this year. It is still in business because U.S. laws on bankruptcy are weird, but, like, they're facing huge losses. And those are the chains. Then you get to the independent theaters, some of which I think are holding up okay because they are not. It's almost like weird. It's like if you're a non-profit and you're not a corporation and you just, like, kind of need to keep the space, there are things you can do for that. And some theaters are doing better than others with that, but it's bad for everyone. I don't know how these giant theater chains that rely on a steady stream of predictable income, which movie business is, to go months and months, and now God knows when, because there just is there's no way to reopen theaters that is both safe and profitable. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. I think you can maybe do it safely, but you can't do it profitably if you're selling like a third of the seats in the theater, for a big movie. So this just is bad. Now it feels like April is the next kind of line in the sand because of No Time to Die moving there. By April, maybe, but I don't know. That's a big maybe, and it's just that's why we would need like a good bailout package for theaters, because it's going to be a lot of guesswork and possibly another, like, I don't know if the theater industry can survive another false opening and closing, which is what we're in the middle of now, where they opened and are having to shut back down, because that's bad. That's so costly.
Yeah, and I wonder if this is going to further push studios towards like what Marvel is doing with the Disney Plus stuff of doing miniseries and something like that. They, like, the $100 million or whatever, like the movie that needs to sell $1 billion in order to make its money back. Like, that's something that obviously is not feasible. Who knows if, like, regardless of COVID, who knows how long that would have been feasible for anyways. Because at some point, like, you grow so much, you just self-destruct. Hello, video game industry. But that's sort of where things were starting to feel like they were heading. You're taking way less risk. The bomb of your like Disney Plus miniseries, if that like doesn't drive a lot of like movement towards subscriptions or keep people on the service, whatever it is, if like people don't like it, it's not good. That is not as significant as if you release your huge fucking tentpole blockbuster movie, like a Justice League or something like that, and it just bombs at the box office. That's a huge hit you take, right? And I suspect that that's like where these things are going to move. I don't know what that means for like theater chains. That doesn't fix their problem. There's nothing you can do with a theater chain. But I
don't
think
know
that's where
though.
Studios would move.
I don't know though, because the only reason the Marvel Disney Plus thing can work is because they've had 10 years of billion-dollar movies to build off of. Like, WandaVision looks really cool. WandaVision, A, would not be made, and B, would not be hyped if you did not have a bunch of movies with Wanda and Vision as characters people wanted to see more of. So, like, but like WB is playing around in the same space, Sean. WB is making a miniseries off of the new Matt Reeves Batman movie about the Gotham City PD, and James Gunn, it was announced a couple weeks ago, is doing a series about, I forget who the character is, but the character John Cena is playing in Suicide Squad. James Gunn is writing a miniseries about him. He's not going to direct it, but he's doing the writing on it, and those will both be for HBO Max. So maybe, but like those are also very expensive. As you say, like the downside isn't as much, but you have to have like the platform built out. I wonder, I mean, part of this is when theaters can safely reopen, the studios are going to have a ridiculous amount of inventory because we're going to have all the 2020 movies plus a bunch of movies that are in production now, like the Batman and things like that, So like, if the vaccine came out in January and we're rolling out and theaters could safely reopen in April, you could have a like historically profitable time for movies if it was safe, but that just feels like a very accelerated timeline. I
also wonder like what the impact is. So because this is like me thinking about my relationship to movie theaters, that obviously like I didn't go to a lot of movies a year. I went to a few, like only like the really big ones that I was interested in. And always like sort of begrudgingly, because movie theater experiences, unless you specifically go out of your way to go to a nice movie theater, you're going to get a bad movie theater experience. So I tended not to go to a lot of movie theaters, and there's something about this of me realizing, it's been, I think, maybe a full year since I saw a movie in the movie theater. I don't even know what the last one is. Probably Spider-Man. When did Spider-Man Far From Home come out?
No, you would have seen Star Wars Rise of Skywalker.
Okay, yeah.
In December.
So that would have been so I'm coming up on a year since I saw a movie in the movie theater, and I'm kind of fine with it. Like, I just feel like of the things that I feel like I miss, or I feel like me personally, my life gets an impact from because of the pandemic and where I'm restricted. Movie theater stuff is just something that like I've not really thought about. Like, because I do like going and seeing new movies in the movie theater. I like seeing new movies in general, but I don't have this urge. Like, I don't know. There's something of like not going such a long time without going to the movie theater. I'm curious to know, like, see if other people will feel that as well. Of like, at some point, you're like, you know what? I'm good. Like, I found all these other things that fill my time. I don't need to go spend the like ridiculous fucking ticket prices it costs to go to a movie at the movie theater. When there's all this other like entertainment I have at my fingertips. At some point, I wonder, like, what does it look like as movies try to roll out again? Even if it's safe to go to the movie theaters, is the same number of people going to be going to movies as there were before this all happened?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I think my opinion is, I think people like me who love movie theaters and miss them will go back when it's safe. And I think people like you and your like model where you go for like the big stuff you're interested in but don't go a lot is a lot of people. And it's a growing number of people. But those movies will be back. Like again, the amount of inventory theaters are building up or studios are building up is huge. And at some point there's going to be Spider-Man Home Away From Home that you, Sean Chapman, I know will go see in a theater when it's out, in part because we do this podcast, but also you would see it anyway. And so, like, that's the thing, is that if the movies are there, people will go to them. And I think if there's a time when it is safe for theaters to open and you have, in a month or two, Black Widow and Fast and Furious 9 and a new James Bond and a new Pixar and a new Disney and blah, 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 people will go back to the theaters. That is like, it will be one. I think there will be a lot of people who do miss it. And even if you don't miss it, that's the way you're going to be able to go see, Black Widow or something, and you'll want to go see it. Long term, I honestly think the bigger thing is I do wonder if the studios are going to need to rethink the tentpole thing, because, boy, it's really shown that, like, if you put all your eggs in that basket, you're really hurting. And so, like, Disney is losing billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. But if you're, like, a mid-level distributor, like Neon or Annapurna or someone, like, and you're able to, like, adjust and do your stuff on VOD and still make the money and get the attention, I think you're kind of okay, because you were making those mid-level things and you don't need to make $1 billion to make a profit. And I think I would imagine studios would want to invest more in that. Like, okay, what's something we can make for 10 million, 20 million, 30 million? Whether that's for TV or for theaters, but it'll also have a VOD component. Like, I do wonder if this will bring back the mid-tier movie that, like, TV has completely eaten that space. But I don't know. Like, Netflix has been big in that space. Hulu has been big in that space. We'll see if studios get back into it. I feel like it would behoove them to, but, I'm not in charge.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing we talk about with movies and with video games, of that, like, diversifying your offering and having low risk, low reward products is just, like, basic economic sense. And it's like, it just feels like, the capitalism, which is not a sound economic policy, is driven so much towards getting the greatest amount of profit in the shortest amount of time possible, which also then means that when you have a crisis situation like this, or even it doesn't have to be a ridiculous crisis, it can just be your product fucked up and it wasn't good, and so nobody bought it. And so if you have that, like, high investment, but if you don't get that investment, or you don't get the return from that investment, you are completely fucked, because you don't have any other revenue stream to fall back on. That's where a lot of these huge companies are.
Especially Disney. Because, like, Disney just has completely put their eggs in that basket. They have nothing that can safely make money in the pandemic, because it's theme parks and giant billion-dollar movies. None of that can make money. Their big thing, luckily, they have is Disney Plus, but Disney Plus has had a very slow year, in part because a lot of the Marvel series they were working on got shut down. Now, WandaVision is going to be the first one. That was supposed to be the second one and tie into the new Thor, and, like, that's all weirdly, like, chopped up now. So, like, The Mandalorian Season 2 they're going to have, which we're excited for, and they're going to have, and they had Hamilton over the summer. But, like, those have been the two big things for Disney Plus, and I feel like if they were a couple years down the road and Disney Plus were more mature, then Disney wouldn't be in as much trouble as they are in right now. But they're bleeding money. They're not going to go out of business. They're Disney, but,
But nobody at Disney is going to be happy that they're bleeding money.
No. All right. You want to move on to some really fucking weird Spider-Man news?
Yeah, let's talk about this, because I don't even understand what this is, Jonathan.
So, honestly, all the Spider-Man news today is really fucking weird, but this is the weirder one. So this was reported this week in The Hollywood Reporter, and, like, from the studio. This is not, like, a rumor. Jamie Foxx is in talks to return as Electro in Spider-Man Home is Where the Heart Is. That's not the actual title, but it'll be something like that. The new Spider-Man 3. He will be reprising, with a question mark, his role from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. There's no indication that this is, like, an alt-universe thing where, like, he's going to come in through a portal out of the world with Andrew Garfield. I think it's more just Jamie Foxx will play Electro, but obviously it would be a different character than he played in Amazing Spider-Man 2, but still called Electro. But this is weird. Like, it clearly follows in some sense on the heels of J.K. Simmons coming back as J. Jonah Jameson. But the difference is, like, J.K. Simmons is just J. Jonah Jameson, and he's so synonymous with that the Amazing Spider-Man didn't even dare recast the role because they knew no one else could do it.
Yeah.
Anyone could play Electro. That's not the problem. My guess is they wanted to use... I don't know. I'm with you, Sean. I'm confused because, like, I guess the easiest way to think about it is they wanted to use Electro, and they thought Jamie Foxx maybe should get a second at bat because Amazing Spider-Man 2 was so bad, and if you can have Jamie Foxx in your movie, that is a net positive for your movie because he's a good actor and he's a star. But like, it is weird. It's weird.
Yeah,
I don't know what else to say.
I think the big question here is that is he reprising the role, right? Like, what is this going to be, the same or a similar version of Electro? Like, is Electro going to be the main villain of the movie? Which, like, is possible, but I would be pretty disappointed if they went for Electro, who is, like, among the lamer of the Spider-Man villains. There are lots of way better villains. I mean, Electro isn't... If you're going to bring back a villain from the Amazing Spider-Man series, the Lizard from the first Amazing Spider-Man is a decent version of that character. Like, I like Jamie Foxx, but his version of Electro sucks in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Everything sucks in that movie. It's not his fault. But it's like not a good version of that character. That I have no interest in seeing that interpretation again. But I don't know if it is that interpretation again. I would be fine with them casting Jamie Foxx to play Electro again if it's a different take on the character, that they're doing a whole new thing with it, because I like Jamie Foxx. But any time you say this thing from Amazing Spider-Man 2 is coming back, that gives me fucking goosebumps. Like, I'm not, like, please no. That movie is fucking terrible. Every part of that movie is terrible, other than the Spider-Man costume was the only good thing in it. So, what the fuck is, like, what is this news? This news is so confusing to me.
It is really confusing, yeah, because I would agree. One, because I want what you suggested of Kraven the Hunter, played by Hugh Jackman, as our villain in Spider-Man 3. Mm-hmm. But if we're not getting that, like, I don't know. Here's the thing. I'll put it this way. There are two producers on the Spider-Man Home is Where the Heart Is series. You have Kevin Feige at Marvel, who on the Marvel movies is the sole lead producer, but on these he co-produces with Amy Pascal, who is the producer from Sony. And my question is this Kevin Feige loves Electro and has a take on it that he wants in the movie, and they thought Jamie Foxx would work, in which case Kevin Feige's instincts on that have been pretty good over the years, you know? Yeah. Or is this like Amy Pascal and the Sony people have a weird, like, soft spot for Amazing Spider-Man 2 and, like, thought it was kind of brilliant and underrated, and they want to bring back Jamie Foxx as the weird, like, Tourette's syndrome version of Electro that no one liked? Like, because I think it's been a little, like, memory hold how bad Amazing Spider-Man 2 is, because it came out in a, like, pre-Zack Snyder Batman v Superman world, and that has so consumed what a bad superhero movie is. Amazing Spider-Man 2 is one of the most holistically terrible movies I've ever seen. I like, it didn't make me as viscerally angry as Batman versus Superman. I think it's an even more inept piece of filmmaking, by far. Like, I agree. Like, the only thing that would come close to it is Suicide Squad. But, like, I like Spider-Man more than Suicide Squad, so it definitely made me angrier than Suicide Squad. But, like, it is really bad. Jamie Foxx is a good actor, but he's very bad in that movie. Everyone is. There's no good performance in that movie, and it's a directing and scripting problem, but, like, it's a bad take on the character. The Electro makeup and effects are bad in that movie. Like, everything about that just did not work, and does not convince me that, like, Electro is a thing. But I don't know. I mean, the new Spider-Man movies have been pretty good so far. You know, Mysterio did not sound like the best idea until, like, you saw that they were doing the full fishbowl thing, and then they did a great job with it. So who knows? But it is such a weird instinct, you know? Like, it's not as weird as if they had said Dane DeHaan is coming back as Green Goblin. I would have like been like, okay, the simulation is breaking down. I'm gonna go take a pill and die because this is not the real world. But it's still bizarre.
Yeah, like, my hope is that we're still getting Hugh Jackman playing Kraven the Hunter, which, you know, to be very clear, that was only, like, my fantasy. There's no like hint or anything that's something that's happening. That would just be the right thing to do, morally and financially and artistically speaking. It would be the right thing to do. So I hope they're still doing that, and that this is just like a weird hint at, like, a multiverse thing where, like, a portal opens up to Amazing Spider-Man 2, and Tom Holland, like, looks through that portal and goes, fuck that shit, and then, like, shuts the portal down and is like, thank God that's not this me. I'm glad I'm not in that world fighting that dude. I'd much rather hang out with Hugh Jackman playing Kraven the Hunter than anything to do with all the bullshit happening over there.
Yeah, the only way I can make sense of it is if it were a cameo, like either your multiverse thing or, like, there's a montage early on of Spider-Man fighting villains in the time between 2 and 3, and one of them is Electro. But either way, you wouldn't announce Jamie Foxx casting for that. You would just do it, and you would keep it a surprise, like they did with J.K. Simmons. So who knows? I'm now, I was already curious for this movie. It's gearing up to shoot later this year. So yeah, I mean, they're making it. It's coming. It's John Watts again. It's all going smoothly, but we'll see. It could be a weird one.
Yeah, I wish that they had provided some context when they announced that. Like, that's all I would want. I just want to know, because it's very weird.
Right. Okay. So, moving from weird Spider-Man news to weird Spider-Man news, Spider-Man Remastered got a full, unveiling this week. This is the PS5 version of Spider-Man, the Insomniac game on PS4, that you have to buy separately. You are not getting it upgraded. You have to buy it with the Miles Morales game, the Ultimate Edition of it for PS5.
Yeah.
And they unveiled a bunch of details about it, all of which looked pretty cool. I mean, the ray tracing stuff and, the new reflections they're able to do, all of that looks really neat. It's got a 60 FPS mode, just like Miles Morales. All good news. The weird part is, we knew they were upgrading Peter Parker's character, model, but they didn't just upgrade it, they have replaced it. They have recast the visual design of Peter Parker. So the actor Yuri Lowenthal, it's still him as Peter Parker and Spider-Man. But when Spider-Man is out of the costume, which, to be fair, he's in the costume for most of the game, but in cutscenes where he's got the mask off, they had one actor playing Peter in the original version of this game, and they have a new actor mocapping him now, and it is a complete, top-to-bottom redesign. He looks very different, and I will say, I saw the picture comparison, and I said, that looks bad, and I don't like it, and then I watched and usually when that happens, and there's a video, you watch the video, and then you feel better about it, because it's more context, and then I watched the video and went, what the goddamn fuck is going on? This dude looks 5 years younger than Peter Parker is supposed to look, because this is supposed to be a mid-20s, post-college Peter, and now it looks like a 16-year-old Peter who notably looks a lot like Tom Holland. It is unmistakable. He looks like store brand, Sears brand Tom Holland, and he looks really weirdly young, and I don't get it, and I don't like it, Sean. I don't like it.
I don't really mind it that much. It was definitely, I think it's that thing of where, my initial reaction was what the fuck? Mostly because you just got so used to that character, because you played a whole 20-hour game, and then for me, all the DLC with it. But now that, I've, sat with it for, a week, and I look at that picture, I'm that seems fine. Because there's, a lot of stuff around this of, it is not, because what they've done is they're not changing who is mocapping the character and who's performing it in that sense. It's just the physical appearance of the character. That is, so right. It's just a physical model, both the guy who was the model for the original Peter Parker and then now this new one. They're both literally underwear models and stuff like that. And their official explanation for this, and we can talk about how much we believe this. I'm kind of leaning towards it's probably a little bit of they wanted to look like Tom Holland. And a little bit of this is an accurate thing that is happening technically, is that with the more high-resolution character models, and this is obviously a choice that was made for, they're making a Spider-Man 2, right? So this is not a thing where they said, we're going to do Spider-Man Remastered, and specifically for Spider-Man Remastered, we're going to recast the character. They're obviously doing work on Spider-Man 2, and said, with these high resolution character models and new tech that they're doing with mocapping and facial performance, the original model, the physical model of the character, his facial structure is too dissimilar from Yuri Lowenthal that it is additional work to try to match Yuri Lowenthal's facial performance, because Yuri Lowenthal's facial performance and when he's reading the lines is used for the character. Matching that was more work. And so they wanted to find someone whose facial structure more closely matched Yuri Lowenthal. So I suspect that is probably something that's fairly accurate. There have been multiple Insomniac employees that have come out saying, no, this is straight up what it is. My guess is probably they knew or they realized, hey, we're going to want to recast this for, technical reasons just to make it easier for us to do, all the cutscenes and everything with this character in the new game. If we're going to recast it, what are we going to do? And then probably they either decided internally or something came down that they wanted the character then to match more closely what the character looks like in the movies with Tom Holland. That is my guess of what has happened here.
So I agree with all that, and I also want to say you explained that so much better than any of Insomniac's actual statements, which I thought were, like, poorly worded at communicating the technical nature of this. Because, yeah, with the way you say that, like that Yuri Lowenthal's, like, he's doing the mocap, but it's a different model, and so the structure, that makes more sense. But they were, I don't know, they're just like, I'm not saying they were even cagey, I just don't think they were great at communicating this complex technical idea, because that's not, they're game designers, their job is not communication. But, like, so I see that, but I basically agree. I think I lean a little more towards it reeks of, like, studio interference of I believe that they knew they needed to recast it, and I just have to, like, in my mind, the scene is they were talking about it, and a Sony exec walked into the room and said, "Hey, did I hear recast?" Or, like, not a Sony exec, actually. I think it's a Marvel exec, because it is so similar to the game plan for the Avengers game.
Yeah.
That by Crystal Dynamics, where, like, the Crystal Dynamics game is everyone in that except Kamala Khan, who is not in the movies yet, is made to look as close to the movie character as they can without having to then go hire that movie actor who would cost millions of dollars. So, like, Tony Stark looks like cheap Sears brand Robert Downey Jr., because if you actually did it off Robert Downey Jr., you would have to pay him $40 million or something, you know?
Yeah.
And Tom Holland would not command $40 million, but he would command millions. And it feels like the same thing. And so I feel like this was like, they said that, and then Marvel got a whiff of it and said, make him look like Tom Holland. And I feel like someone at Insomniac then raised their hand and said, but our character's older and shouldn't look like that, and that's dumb. And by the time they said that, the Marvel exec had walked out of the room and went to, like, and was, like, lighting a cigarette with $100 bill, because that's the kind of money they have. And it just is weird to me. Like, I cannot get over that, like, the character just looks too young for the voice, for the period of life. Like, people have done this side-by-sides with, like, new Peter and existing Miles Morales, and it is weird that Miles looks older than Peter now. Like, Peter is too baby-faced, I think. So, yeah, and part of what made Spider-Man by Insomniac so special is that this was such a distinct version of Peter Parker than what we have in the current movies, and it is such a weird instinct to make it closer to that. It's not going to ruin the game. It's not going to ruin the sequel. Most of the time, you're not looking at his weird baby face. You're looking at him in the Spidey suit. I still think it's weird.
Yeah, I would say that I think it's, like, way too early to, like, make that kind of judgment of it yet, just because I think because the only thing we've seen is, like, that, like, 50-second clip or whatever of a scene that is a weird scene to show for your, like, and this is the new Peter Parker model, because it's mostly a Dr. Octopus scene. Like, it's all about Doc Ock in that sequence, and it's, like, the lighting is really dark because it's in the lab and they've turned all the lights off, and it's about Doc Ock, like, unveiling the arms or whatever near the beginning of that game. Like, if I were to show off this model, like, I want to see a scene of him and, like, MJ together in the apartment or in, like, the restaurant where it's, like, nice, clear lighting, that it's, like, very natural, like, neutral kind of framing. It's not a very dramatic scene in that sense. It's just these two characters talking. That's what I want to see, because that's where you get the performance for Yuri Lowenthal. Because it's still the same performance, right? It's, like, literally the same line readings. It's presumably the same mocap data that they have from when they made that game that they're then matching onto this different physical model. And so, like, I suspect that probably once you've played a couple of hours of the game and, like, spent time with this new model, like, actually in the context, I suspect that it'll be totally fine. I suspect in some ways it will be worse because it does look younger. I think also, like, the appearance of it looking younger is probably going to melt away once you have it associated with the performance that Yuri Lowenthal gives, which is of, like, an
That's
older,
fair,
more world-weary Peter Parker. Like, I just think it's, like, I wish that they had given more material for it, just because then I think it would give us a better sense of how it is going to work with the character and match the performance. But I guess my instinct is to trust Insomniac because they are so good with this stuff, that I think once you actually play the game, I think, like, it will be totally fine. I think you'll, like, forget that it is a different model and that kind of stuff.
I think you're probably right, and it's an incentive to play remastered before 2 to, like, get used to the character again. Because this is jarring. I cannot think of an analog for a character model shifting this dramatically between games. Like, The closest thing would be something like Lara Croft between Tomb Raider and Tomb Raider Remastered, but it's still very clearly the same character. It's just, Tress effects, if anyone remembers that. But, like, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'll say, overall, I am kind of excited to play the remastered version of this game. Are you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, because it is the thing where they had said a lot of, like, the technical stuff that they were doing, and it sounded like a big change. But actually seeing it in motion with, like, 60 frames per second, seeing the ray tracing stuff, like, it looks like they're doing a substantial amount of work to the game, and they're putting, like, new costumes and stuff in it. I'm specifically really excited to play the game at 60 frames per second. I'll probably...
Me too.
Because it's like a 4K 30 ray tracing, all the bells and whistles mode, and then I think it's, like, upscaled 4K, no ray tracing, and 60 frames per second. And I'll probably mess around with the ray tracing stuff and be like, this looks nice, and then I'll play it on 60 frames per second and be like, I feel like that combat in the web swinging is going to feel really, really good at a high frame rate.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like that we're getting more, like, PC-style graphic options in games now. Yeah, it's cool. We should do more. We don't ever need the full PC breakdown, because that's crazy, but, like, more of that is always welcome, and... it sounds like the new consoles can accommodate that. And yeah, I'm not crazy about them charging you for the remastered version, because I would love it if it were just standardized as, like, if you own it, you own it. But it's only $20 with the Miles Morales thing. And compared to last gen, when remastered games just came out for like 40 or frankly more often a full 60, this is still better.
Yeah, and you can still, like, if you don't want to pay money for the remastered version, you could still just play the PS4 version backwards compatible on your PS5.
Yeah. And hey, I platinumed that game once. I will platinum it again. It was a fun game.
Yeah, and specifically, the one I'm excited for it because they, like, a couple months after Spider-Man came out, they released like a even harder difficulty mode called Ultimate that I played a little bit on, but it was so soon after the game I didn't want to replay it all the way through again. So I'm like also additionally excited that it's like I finally have like a good excuse to go back and play the game on like the new difficulty mode they put in.
Yeah. So lots of Spider-Man goodness coming this year, and it'll be, we're going to have, the PS5 is having a really good, like, launch month, but then we're going to go into a little bit of a fallow period, and it'll be nice to have that sitting there to, like, play with the power of the new system,
Yeah. Honestly, playing a lot of Genshin Impact over the past 2 days, like, I'm just excited to play that game on a PS5 because it is that thing of when you see... Like, the Series X had, like, one of its big, like, hands-on rollouts last week, and they showed off, like, how fast the loading is on backwards compatibility. And it's just like, fucking Genshin Impact's load times are so long, in a very Breath of the Wild way, because you go into these, like, trial areas that it loads into those really fast, because it's this little area, and then you finish it, and then you load back into the open world, and so it's like, when you load back into the open world, it's like a minute-long load. So it's like... Just knowing that we're going to get this SSD fast loading stuff makes loading time so much more noticeable to me now. Also, with the other last major game I played being Ghost of Tsushima, I feel like my tolerance for load times is so much lower than it has been for like the past 5 years.
That's a good way to put it. Absolutely. Final piece of video game news this week is they announced the new character coming to Super Smash Bros. It is Steve from Minecraft, and also Alex, which is the girl version. If you don't know that much about Minecraft, Steve is like the name for like the main default player character, and then Alex is the girl alternate. And there will be 3 costumes for Steve, 3 for Alex, and then the 2 remaining ones is you can play as the zombie or the Enderman, which I think is a particularly creative little flourish they added there. And I gotta say, like, if you gave me like my wish list of like the 10 characters I most want in Smash, Minecraft would not be on there, but it looks really cool, and I'm really excited to play. It comes out October 13th. The map looks really cool. There was this week also Sakurai, after that, did like a 45-minute thing where he went through the character. I didn't watch all of it, but I watched enough of it to see, like, there's actually quite a bit of depth to Steve. He's a little bit like... what's the Byleth from Fire Emblem, and that he's got 3 different weapons depending on what kind of inputs you're doing. The weapons can like level up over time as you're playing because they can go from like wood to diamond, like in Minecraft. And it's another one where like Sakurai and team have so nailed the aesthetic of the game and like put it in Smash Bros. That I'm really excited to see it in person. And this is also one, and Sean, you and I went back and forth on this on Twitter a little bit this week, where I am baffled by the backlash to this.
Yeah, so because it was, this is one of those things where now that my like schedule at school means that I am like completely removed from the world from like the hours of like 7 to noon, there's just no break in which I can like do anything and just like briefly see, is anything happening in the world. So I tend to miss and like only pick up the like after effects of when some like dumb controversy has happened in the video game space. So it was just me like, because I had totally forgotten that they were even announcing the new Smash Brothers character, and so I was like scrolling through Twitter during lunch, just being like, oh, I wonder if anything happened, and just seeing all these people mad about Minecraft. I'm like, what the fuck is happening? And then slowly, putting the pieces together as we do in the world of Twitter, realizing, oh, okay, so Steve was the new character, and my immediate thought was like, but that's a rad choice. Like that's a cool character to put into your game that one offers like a lot of like clear, interesting gameplay opportunities. Two is like the main representative character of the biggest video game in the world that has been like the or one of the biggest video games in the world for 10 fucking years. It's been 10 years. Minecraft is not new. Minecraft is for old people and for kids now because it's 10 fucking years old. And I like it when Smash Brothers, even as someone who doesn't really play the game but likes watching the videos and kind of following it from a distance, I like when Smash Brothers puts something big, new into the game, right? Something like when they put Terry in from Fatal Frame, or not Fatal Frame, Fatal Fury. They should put Fatal Frame in. That's, on the Nintendo consoles also. But when they put Terry Bogard from Fatal Fury into the game, like that was awesome because it's like there's this really cool piece of video game history and of the video game world and community that now gets to be represented in Smash Brothers alongside Pac-Man and Mega Man and Sonic and Cloud and Bayonetta, all the other like weird third-party picks, Banjo that they have in that game now. And it is 1,000 times more interesting to me. 1,000 times more interesting to me than another Fire Emblem dude and a character from ARMS, which were the last two DLC characters, which, I'm sure those characters probably play fine, but as someone who's just interested in like cool new things getting put into Smash Brothers, you could not have picked two more boring choices for DLC than a Fire Emblem character and an ARMS character. Getting the dude from Minecraft, that's fucking dope. And all the old crusty motherfuckers on the internet that are like, ooh, how dare they put the Minecraft in my Smash Brothers game? How dare someone else's nostalgia be represented in this video game that has Mario and Link and Donkey Kong and fucking Star Fox and all the characters that I liked when I was a kid? How dare they do this? It was the most ridiculous fucking internet outrage I've seen since they replaced the character model for Spider-Man in the Spider-Man video game.
That's a good point, Sean. But yes, I agree. I mean, it's Minecraft, guys. Like, what is a more fitting third party to put in Smash? Okay, it would have been Banjo-Kazooie, but they did Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're talking about, like, third parties that should be in Smash, of course it's Minecraft, because for one, Minecraft has been big on Nintendo consoles for a long time now. It didn't start there, but it's been there since the Wii U, I think, is where Minecraft first came to Nintendo, but it was on the Wii U, the 3DS, and the Switch. It's big on Switch. It's big wherever it is. It is the biggest selling game in the history of the medium. Everybody has some level of affection for Minecraft. I don't care who you are. Like, you've seen it. I don't know how you can like look at Minecraft and like hate it. You don't have to love it. Like, Sean, you don't play Minecraft actively, but I don't think you go around going, fucking Minecraft, making money.
Minecraft is cool. Like, I've over the course of the years probably put like 10 something hours into Minecraft, but I've watched a lot of Minecraft on the internet because it is a really cool platform for people to do cool stuff, because Minecraft is a cool game.
Yes. It's a cool game. It's a cool aesthetic that's very different for Smash. And just, it fits. It's like, it makes, like, this is Super Smash Brothers Ultimate, And I think the continuing project to make it ultimate by adding in stuff like this is what makes it special. And it's like, that first DLC pack just nailed it with, like, you had Terry Bogard, you had Joker from Smash, you had the Dragon Quest hero, and you had Banjo-Kazooie were the four, and then you had the Fire Emblem guy. And they were all great fighters, but those first four were like really cool in like bringing in important franchises into the game. And then this DLC pack started with Min Min from ARMS. It's fine, whatever, but ARMS is not a big deal. But like, this is the kind of thing that I feel like you want from these big DLCs, and I hope we get more of this kind of thing to make Smash Bros. Feel like it's like Smash Bros. Should be the biggest tent possible. And if you're gonna throw a video game party and you don't invite Minecraft, I think you're doing it wrong.
Exactly. It's just because then you then look at what are like the characters that those people then want in Smash Brothers. In like one that I saw a lot of that is just hilarious to me is Geno from who's one of the party members from Super Mario RPG. It's like,
Oh yeah, that's been
what the fuck, dude? They're not gonna, maybe they would one day, but if that's really like where your heart is, and you're gonna be upset if it's any character other than Geno that they put in Smash Brothers, you're gonna be upset a lot because chances are they're not going to pull out a character who has been in one Nintendo video game one time 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, people have been asking for that since Brawl, I feel like. That's been one that people are so fucking annoyed. Basically since the internet was a place where people talked about Smash,
Yeah, like
So-
if they're going to do a Mario RPG character, they should just put Paper Mario as a character in the game.
Yes.
Like I would put Paper Mario into the game 1,000 years before I'd go to Geno.
Put Paper Mario in, and then you could do a bunch of his like sidekicks could come in and do stuff too. Yeah. So anyway, all right. But Sean, really, why I wanted to bring this up is because would you like to do a dramatic reading for us?
Yeah, I saw you said this on Twitter, so I was like, okay, it looks like we're doing this again.
So Masahiro Sakurai, who is such a sweet man, he announced the character, and then he had a little 3-minute speech about it, and I think the best way to imagine this speech when you look at just the words is like a Japanese businessman in a nice suit at the end of a day at a sake bar in, Tokyo or something, kind of hunched over, smoking his 7th cigarette of the night on the second carafe of sake, drunkenly complaining to his coworkers. That's what this speech sounds like. So Sean, the end of it that I've highlighted in red, you don't have to read that. But if you would read everything up to then, especially if you take it like just as the words themselves, this is so funny to me.
Okay. So, what did you think? What exactly did we just watch? Yes, that's right. Minecraft. The best-selling game in the world is coming to the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate game. Even I didn't think this day would come. In thinking about new fighters for this game, we don't just play favorites or pick from a hat. More often than not, these discussions start by Nintendo approaching me with an idea. Of course, if I can't do that idea justice, I'll tell them no. But then someone from Nintendo will come to my workplace and say, Mr. Sakurai, surely you can put Minecraft in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, while peering over their glasses. They make it sound easy. I guess they think this all happens by magic or something? Don't they know what kind of game Minecraft is? The wizardry required to make it work in this game? It's impossible. So I laid it out straight for them. I said, yes, I can do it. The plan for the fighter is easy to create. The graphics should also be straightforward. The motion is relatively simple, and the sound is comparable to other fighters. There are plenty of things to consider, but we don't need to implement any voices. What is difficult, however, is the programming work required to bring the character to life. It is a massive challenge. Plus, if we have to rework all our existing stages so that blocks can be placed in them, what about biomes? We also need to consider things like those. And most importantly, how do we adjust the game balance to accommodate the new fighter? Who knows what will happen? Making everything work well together in the game, including the fighter's physical attacks and their short reach, will be extremely hard. They would end up being a really unusual fighter. Despite all that, it looks like we're somehow going to be able to release the fighter.
Thank you, Sean. I think you nailed it. If you have not seen that video yet, it is... I love that, like, Sakurai clearly has a great sense of humor, but I also sense that he is slowly losing his grasp on reality.
Yeah, I think the being isolated because of COVID has probably not helped his just like in the whole working on Smash Brothers syndrome that he's had for unfortunately his entire life, it seems.
Yeah, but it's great. Okay, one last piece of news, and this is a I'm going to get angry piece of news, Sean.
Okay, yeah, this is a one worth getting angry about.
So this we've talked many times about J.K. Rowling being a transphobe, and we talked about the Harry Potter game when it was announced at the PS5 event, and I was content to leave it at that. But then this week, Jason Schreier broke the news on Twitter that during a company Q&A, Warner Bros. Games president David Haddad addressed employees' questions surrounding the recent announcement of Hogwarts Legacy and Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling's anti-trans comments. His comments were sent to Jason Schreier, and, quote, David Haddad Not a lot I can comment on, other than since we did get so many questions, I wanted to be responsive. The way I think I'd like to do it is, I'd like to echo something you've heard from our most senior executive leadership. While J.K. Rowling is the creator of Harry Potter, and we are bringing that game to life, in many places she's a private citizen also, and that means she's entitled to express her personal opinion on social media. I may not agree with her, and I might not agree with her stance on a range of topics, but I can agree that she has the right to hold her opinions. And talk about missing the forest for the transphobe, because that's not the fucking point, Mr. Haddad, Mr. Warner Brothers. That's not the point. No one's asking, does J.K. Rowling have free speech rights? No, fuck you. Of course, like, I hate the way people make these kind of things, like, where someone can say something objectively awful, and then awful people turn it into, you're trying to cancel them and you're trying to get rid of their free speech. No, they can. J.K. Rowling, everyone in this debate will agree, she is entitled to say whatever she wants. That is true. But we are also entitled to find it disgusting, and to say it is disgusting, and to ask of the company that is profiting off her work and identity that they condemn those words and say that they support the people that J.K. Rowling is not just harassing, but threatening with her harassment. What that statement needed was, J.K. Rowling is entitled to her opinion, but I find those words abhorrent. Warner Brothers does not agree, and trans and LGBTQ people of all shapes and sizes are welcome at our company, in our game, and playing our game. It is not hard to make the equality statement where you condemn the words. You don't even have to condemn the person if you don't want, but you condemn the words and you say, we welcome people of all shapes and sizes here. It would be disingenuous probably coming from these people, but you can at least fucking say it. And, last time we talked about the Harry Potter game, Sean, I said, I don't think you need to boycott it. Like, if you want to, that's fine. If not, I don't think it has a huge impact, and you don't need to feel bad about it, blah, blah, blah. I will just say for me now, looking at that, there is no way I would touch this with a 10-foot fucking pole if the people releasing the game can't even do the baseline, smallest amount of courtesy of saying we think trans people are people when talking about this.
Yeah, it's particularly galling because I feel like we are in an era, and we have been for the past few years, where it's been pretty normal for companies to make that kind of statement in response to situations like this one. Like, this isn't the first time awful, fucking disgusting people have been attached to profitable IP that other companies want to exploit, right, for their money. So you have, like, playbooks that you can go by for exactly that kind of statement you just said, Jonathan. That is not necessarily like the best thing in the world, and you'd want a company like WB to do more here. But the least you can do is to emphatically say what she's saying does not represent the beliefs of WB, of the people making the game, of like the community that we want to build around this game, and that we defend the rights and personhood of trans people in any context, right? Like, it's a very simple statement to make, that it's not as if it would be revolutionary for WB to say it here. It would be like the bare minimum for them to say it. And so to come out with this, like, what honestly feels like this, like, Bush era motherfucking bullshit with just, I may not agree with her and I might not agree with her stance on a range of topics. Like, he's not even saying that he doesn't agree with her. He's saying he might not, right? He's not even saying, like, he's not saying anything here. He's just saying, like, oh, she said some stuff. The things she said are things. The things she said are not things that I have said, but they are things that she has said. Anyways, thank you. And that's all that statement is saying in terms of its, like, grammar and meaning. It is the most toothless, nothing fucking bullshit. And it is truly infuriating. So, like, fuck this dude.
And it is infuriating in, like, corporate mainstream culture what we still think is, like, open to debate and is just a matter of opinion versus, like, if J.K. Rowling had gone on Twitter and said, I love black people, I just don't think we should have interracial marriage, that would be roughly as bad as what she said about trans people, like, in that context. But, like, no one would be saying, oh, she has the right to her opinion, it's okay. Everyone would be going, what the goddamn fuck are you talking about? That is insane racism, right?
Yes.
But like we've taken that and largely in polite culture, a lot of it's come back in recent years, sadly. But largely in polite culture, those are things you don't say, But like, and even like things like gay marriage, you don't hear a lot of like you did in the Bush years of like, I think we've all memory hold this, but George W. Bush and the entire Republican Party wanted to have a constitutional amendment barring gay marriage. And now it would be in polite society wrong to go around saying, but the Bible, blah, you'd be looked at as a loon.
Family values.
Right, exactly. But trans people are up for the taking, and you can bash them all the fuck you want on the internet. And I see, fucking journalists I respect who do this and say, like, they don't themselves are not anti-trans, but will say the, like, oh, it's a matter of opinion thing. It's like, no, guys.
Very much
like
not.
marginal tax rates are a matter of opinion. What kind of healthcare plan you favor is a matter of opinion. What you think we should do about the deficit is a matter of opinion. The humanity of other people is not in the realm of normal political debate, and it shouldn't be seen as such, because when you do that, you are effectively putting your thumb on the scale with the oppressors, not with the oppressed,
Yeah.
And again, the point is, no one is saying that J.K. Rowling does not have the right to that opinion. She can think whatever the hell she wants. The point is, there are consequences for what you think. And there should be.
Yeah, not just what you think, but like what you like. It's things that she has actively done. Like saying something is an action. Like words have power and meaning, right? So it's like she can obviously, like anybody can think whatever the fuck they want because nobody has any way of knowing what other people think. But if you say and do things that then harm other people, which is what she has done on a massive scale because of the platform she has, like people in her orbit, which is what this guy is that works for WB, the position he's in, have a responsibility to speak out against that. And yeah, it's like the way he frames this as him saying, I might not agree with her stance on a range of topics, which just sort of implies that being a transphobe is like in line with other things that are okay to be disagreeable with, right? It's kind of like you're saying here, Jonathan, of like he's rhetorically positioning it in this like place where it's like, well, you can have all kinds of positions and opinions on whether or not trans people are actually people. And that's just sort of what he's implying with his rhetoric. And it is like, it's just awful. And like, I'm with you, Jonathan, that it's awful for the people who have made this game and all the work that they've put in. But it's like when you don't even have the dude who runs the company that's releasing the game doing anything about this, it is very hard to have any kind of conscience about spending money on that game.
Yeah. Because, it would be very easy for WB to create the permission structure for people to get this game and just issue the statement, ask your marketing agency, ask your comms people, write it up. It's not hard to write up, put it out. But if they're not going to do that, that means they are effectively anti-trans. I'm sorry. That's what they're being. If you're not for it, in this case, you are against it. This is kind of an absolutist thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to finish with some listener mail today, Sean?
Yes. What have the listeners asked of us, Jonathan?
All right. I think you have most of these. I've added a couple that were on Twitter since you got the outline, but the first couple are all on here. So first off, most of these were from Twitter. I did get one my brother Thomas texted me, and he said, since your most popular podcast ever is about Persona 5, where the hell is your Persona 5 The Royal episode? So Thomas badgers me about this just about every week because Thomas somehow lapped us and became an even bigger Persona fan. Sean, Thomas is right now on his 4th playthrough of Persona 5.
Has he played Persona 1 or the Persona 2s?
No.
Then he can get in fucking line before you say that he is a bigger Persona fan than I am. That's all I'm going to say on that subject.
I'm just saying he spends a lot of his time on this. Anyway, the simple answer is this year has been crazy. We have been busy. We will do a Persona 5 Royal playthrough and episode at some point. We would like to do it kind of similar to how we did Persona 5, where we do it in chunks as we're playing. But that means we need to be playing it at the same time, and we need to feel like we have time for it. That time has not granted itself yet. For me, I don't think it will until the new year, because we're getting new consoles in a month, and I'm not playing it in the next month. I'm just too busy. it will come. It will come when it comes, and it'll be better for it, I guess.
Yeah.
And I am sorry it's taken so long.
I've had my copy of Persona 5 Royal bought and at the ready since that game came out. I mean, I think the real reason why this didn't happen was your fault, Jonathan, not bringing your PlayStation 4 with you when you came here during the pandemic stuff. Like, 'cause that's when we would have done it. But you were stuck in Colorado for months instead of like a week or whatever that you were originally going to be here before going to Iowa. So that was, I mean, that's also why you didn't play Final Fantasy VII Remake until like several months after it came out.
That's true. But that was still a busy month. We also had Doom in there, and I think there was
it was
some
a
other
busy
things,
month, but it is when that would have happened.
Right.
And because I remember distinctly, it's why, because we talked about it at the time, it's why I didn't start playing Persona 5 Royal when I got it, was because you're like, oh, well, I can't play it right now, so we'll just wait on that. And so I've been waiting ever since.
I'm sorry, Sean. I have it too. I have my Steelbook. It's out. It's next to my Persona 5 Steelbook, so they're right there together. At this point, I will be playing it on the PS5 because I actually, to make money for buying a PS5, I did sell my PS4. So I don't have my PS4 with me right now, but I'll be playing it on the PS5. I gotta say, Sean, someone paid me $300 for my PS4.
Someone is an idiot. Wow, that's
okay then. Yeah. But anyway, it filled. I've got like my metaphorical piggy bank for my PS5, and that plus like I had an old TV and something else filled that pretty fast. So luckily, I will be able to afford a PS5. But yes, so I will be playing Persona 5 with a more comfortable controller and faster loading times. Not that the loading times were a problem on Persona 5, but yeah, I mean, we'll get there. I do feel bad. I had forgotten, Sean, the COVID context. I guess we can chalk this up to one of many things that got fucked up because of COVID.
Yeah.
Because that was a funny period in my life when I came out with like one bag of clothes and was doing like laundry twice a week too. I mean, it was crazy, it was crazy.
Yeah, like we've got a good excuse for why it didn't happen. So I don't feel too bad about it. We'll get around to it.
Yeah. And I don't know why Thomas, who knows this most intimately, is the one badgering us the most about it. But oh well. Yeah.
I mean, he's the one who made the spreadsheet that eventually we'll have to address of like all the Persona songs or whatever. Like that'll happen one day, I guess.
Apparently he spent the weekend updating it with all the Persona 5 Royal music too. So anyway.
He can come talk to me once he's updated with the Persona 2 music.
He was doing that too.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Sean H. on Twitter said, "You guys promised to watch the Assassin's Creed movie and we're still waiting. That podcast would be Prometheus 2.0. I guess Sean H. must be a long-time listener because old school, because I think it's our third or second episode ever is when we first reviewed Prometheus because you had just seen it and I had seen it and you wanted to rant about it. And we did at least like 2 or 3 podcasts on Prometheus because that movie made us so angry.
Well, because we did the stupid thing of watching like the extended director's cut or whatever it was, or whatever like DVD release they did. I remember that and being upset with you that we did that.
Yeah, we did I think it was the Blu-ray had a bunch of deleted scenes that were like even more inexplicable than what's in the movie. So that's funny, but I do have to correct the record here. We never promised to watch the Assassin's Creed movie. It was a stretch goal on our short-lived Patreon after episode 200, and not enough of y'all signed up for that Patreon, so we never hit the stretch goal. So we are under no legal obligation to watch the Assassin's Creed movie. I am still open to it because it might be a funny episode. Maybe, Sean, if we have a slow week over the holidays, I will bring the DVD with me, and maybe we can do that. But I want to be clear, we never promised.
Yeah, and I just want to say I'm very upset that this other Sean has brought this up again because I have like very strategically never mentioned that you had said that and bought that fucking DVD and brought it with you. It was like in your bag for years. It felt like it was just there, and I like very carefully never mentioned it because I don't want to watch it. I think it would be particularly. I don't know if it would be better or worse in this new context of where Assassin's Creed, it feels like it's effectively a completely different franchise now than it was, because that movie came out a little bit before Assassin's Creed Origins, which like just changed what Assassin's Creed is to me. So I think it would be a particular like relic, not just as a movie or as a video game movie, but as an Assassin's Creed movie. I feel like that movie has been abandoned with all the other old Assassin's Creed stuff in some dark, dank well.
Well, Sean, this movie came out in December 2016. So next December will be its 5th year anniversary. Maybe that's when we do it. The 5-year anniversary of the much-loved Assassin's Creed movie.
That the joke of doing an anniversary watch of that movie is maybe good enough that I might be on board because of how stupid and like that we would be literally the only people on the planet. They're like, oh, it's the 5-year anniversary of the Assassin's Creed movie. Time to dig in, motherfuckers.
Okay, Sean, there you go, Sean. You have 15 months to brace yourself for the Assassin's Creed 5th anniversary episode. I think we'll be okay.
Maybe a 4K Blu-ray version will be out by then. We can pick up and watch it in the highest quality possible.
Absolutely. All right, we've got some questions from Jay Mitchell on Twitter. He said, have either of you delved into tokusatsu at all? Sorry. Specifically the big 3 TV shows of Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, and Ultraman. There's more than 40 years of history there. I will say, Sean, I have, on your recommendation, bought the Ultra Q Blu-ray, and with that, because they were all on sale and it was like really cheap, I also got Ultraman and Ultra 7. So I have the first 3 shows from that line, but I have not watched them yet. I know you watched Ultra Q and have been looking to do some Ultraman. Have you seen any of that yet?
I have not watched any Ultraman yet. I have the Blu-ray for Ultraman. I like tokusatsu is one of those things that I know I would really like, and I'm scared to start watching it because I know what it would do, right? Because, I mean, for people who are not super familiar, tokusatsu is like TV, basically like TV show versions of like Daikaiju or like Godzilla movie, Gamera movie type stuff. That's also Power Rangers would be the main cultural touchstone of Power Rangers is Super Sentai localized effectively for the Western audience. So I've never really watched much Super Sentai stuff outside of watching Power Rangers when I was a kid. I have watched some of the Spider-Man, which is one of the original Super Sentai shows, is the Japanese Spider-Man TV show from the 60s.
How do I not know about this?
You don't know about the Spider-Man
no.
Power Rangers show? Oh, it's fucking crazy. I don't know if I would call it a good show, but it is fucking nuts. He's got a robot called, like, Lepardamon or something like that. That's ridiculous. And he says, like...
Yeah, Leopardon.
Send you to the jaws of hell. He's got, like, a crazy catchphrase that has the word hell in it. And, like, a lot of tropes from Sentai started with that weird Spider-Man show.
Okay, how have we not done a podcast on this? This is...
I assumed that you knew that it existed. I didn't know that this was that much of a blind spot for you.
Oh my god. Yeah, no, we should... Absolutely. I'm looking at this right now. There's 41 episodes. I think in time for the next Spider-Man movie, we should time something where we watch enough of this series that we can talk about it.
Okay, yeah. I think that's the right way to frame it, because I don't even know if I could watch the full thing, because it is... it's very formulaic and very cheesy. So it's like, I think, like, cheese is good. It's not 40 episodes of a TV show. I don't think I can sustain that.
It's 40 episodes and a movie, so maybe we do the movie and some of the episodes, but yeah.
I would like to watch Kamen Rider at some point, because that's very famous and is like a huge cultural touchstone in Japan, and it seems like good in a way that is, like, I think a little bit beyond like the Super Sentai stuff. It seems slightly more mature, has always been my impression of Kamen Rider, and there's like a billion Kamen Rider shows as well. So I would like to do some more tokusatsu stuff. I'll definitely watch Ultraman at some point, because I did like Ultra Q quite a bit.
And I really want to get into Ultraman stuff, because I have those Blu-rays and they're so cool. The like steelbook sets I have for Ultra Q, Ultraman, and then I know people say Ultra 7 is like really good. So that's like known as kind of the not adult, but like it's the more mature of the Ultraman series. So yeah, at some point. Okay, Jay Mitchell also asked, what game do you want to play that has been sitting in your backlog but you just can't seem to get to? I think Persona 5 Royal is the obvious answer right now.
Yeah, that's a big one. I feel like I have a lot like, I definitely, some of like the last few years of Resident Evil, I really wanted to find the time to play, because I own Resident Evil 7, I own Remake 2, and I really want to play those. I just need to find the time to sit down and play them. That's the stuff that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, I've played all the Resident Evils except 7, so I do want to do that. I will probably do that around Halloween this year, because October there are no big game releases, and so when I'm done with Hades, maybe I'll do 7 right before Halloween, because I want to be ready for 8. And then for me, honestly, my answer that came to mind is, so last year I started playing all the Dragon Quest games in order. I did 1, 2, 3, 4, and then other stuff came out, and then I haven't played 5 yet, so I'm going to say Dragon Quest 5. One, because that's known as like maybe the best game in the series, and also it's like once I get into 5, then I can keep going with the series, and I want to play the rest of those. So I should really find the time for that, because it's a big life goal for me to play all the Dragon Quest games. So yeah. All right. Jay Mitchell also asked a completely random question: grape jelly, strawberry jelly, or other?
I'm not a big jelly guy. I'm gonna say, like, I will go straight peanut butter sandwich over peanut butter and jelly most of the time. There's something about the texture, and I don't like that it's usually very cold. I'm not a huge fan of.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a huge PB&J person. I do like toast with jelly, but I will actually say I like toast with jam. I'm not a huge jelly person. I do prefer jam. I do prefer strawberry to grape jam.
I think if I had to pick one of these two, strawberry would be my pick.
Yes, but any kind of jam I honestly like, and usually the red jam. So strawberry, raspberry. Raspberry is probably my favorite jam. But yeah, I will. Grape jelly is fine if I get it. I actually was somewhere the other day where I got some toast, and all they had was grape jelly, and that was is better than nothing on my toast. But I would usually go strawberry, and I would usually go jam. So now you can use that. That feels like you're trying to like figure out our like security question for something.
Yeah, his next question is what your mother's maiden name is, which I thought was a weird one to ask. And then after that, it's what street did you live on when you were born?
Yes. All right. Jimmy Jonathan Lee on Twitter gave us a couple questions. Let's see if some of these are actually really interesting. So I don't know if we'll do all of these, but we'll do some of them. Because this first one is a Doctor Who question. We haven't talked about Doctor Who much lately. Mm-hmm. How do you guys feel about the RTD era? He's referring to Russell T Davies, who was the showrunner who came when Doctor Who came back, and he did all the Tennant stuff and all the Chris Eccleston stuff. How do you feel about the RTD era of Who nowadays, especially considering the disappointment with the recent Chibnall era? Are you more charitable positive on Davies as a showrunner? I don't think you and I have ever been super down on Russell T Davies, but I will say I have viewed him more positively in recent years than I did, I think, during the Moffat years.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, I mean, in comparison, especially because it feels like Chibnall is trying to do a lot of the stuff that RTD did, and it makes him look even more impressive in relationship, because, like, the stuff that is good about the RTD era is very good. Chibnall trying to ape some of that stuff of the more kind of, like, human, like, soap opera drama kind of stuff. Chibnall's not good at that at all. And so, yeah, I think, like, I've always really liked RTD stuff. I think overall, compared to Moffat, it's not as good. We're not exactly what I'm looking for at Doctor Who all the time. And I think he had that tendency of having bad season finales most of the time, which is, like, always kind of like I think his season structure stuff was rough. But a lot of the individual episodes that he wrote in his era are fantastic. And Midnight from season 4 is one of my favorite episodes of modern Doctor Who, so he always gets 2 thumbs up for that one.
He also cultivated a lot of good writers. I think his stuff was better on a micro level than it was a macro level in terms of the structure. He also cast 2 really phenomenal doctors, a lot of great companions. It's a perfectly serviceable, and sometimes more than that, era of Doctor Who. There are much, much worse eras of Doctor Who, Chibnall's being the bottom of the barrel, but, like, you know, I would say it's more consistent than, like, 5th Doctor era.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I would absolutely. I think he did it, like, his era of Doctor Who was very good. It's, like, not as good as Moffat. It's not as good as some of the best stuff from classic Doctor Who, but it's, like, way better than any of the John Nathan Turner era, other than, like, maybe the last couple of the last 2 seasons with the 7th Doctor, which are phenomenal. Is, like, that's where I would say, like, he's maybe in that area.
Yeah. So it's good stuff. And did you see the news that Chris Eccleston is coming back to play the Doctor for Big Finish?
Yes, I did see that.
That's wild.
Yes, I never thought he would come back to the show.
Well, it's been a little bit of an arc for Chris Eccleston over the last couple of years. He has clearly warmed up to it more. I think he's gone through a period of self-reflection. You know, he wrote that autobiography. He started going to fan conventions and seeing that people really loved his work. And I think maybe it just took time to get over it, you know. And I have not followed a ton of the Big Finish stuff recently. I might make a point to listen to that, because he's so good, and there's not enough of him.
Yeah,
you
definitely.
know. Yeah. All right. he asked a question about The Simpsons, which I think is probably aimed at me because you're not a big Simpsons guy, Sean.
Yeah.
But he said, why do you feel The Simpsons should have lasted as long as it has? Most of the original creative team left by season 9, and also I feel like Futurama inherited Simpsons' original witty, satirical edge. Better to burn out than fade away. I am not someone who shares the popular opinion that Simpsons was only good for 9 years and should have been canceled. I think, because one, it is actually not true that most of the original creative team left by season 9. The show has been run since season 14, I think, by Al Jean, and Al Jean was there. He's like one of the main guys from seasons 3 and 4, which is considered like peak Simpsons. So, and Matt Groening has always had a role on it, even if he's not day to day. So it's not 100% true that the original creative team are all gone. And I have seen all of The Simpsons in the first 10 years multiple times. I know I've seen everything from seasons 11 to 20 at least once, and then seasons like 21 to 30 I know less well, but I've seen some episodes there. And I think the first 10 years are obviously the best part of The Simpsons. There are lots and lots of episodes I love between seasons 11 and 20. There are fewer of them, but there are lots I enjoy. And when I see ones from the later days, particularly once they made the shift to HD, I think they got the visual style of the show they were able to do a lot of fun things with. Simpsons had never been like the best animated show or anything, but I think they were able to do some more interesting visual gags here and there. I've said this before, I'll say it again. There's never been a Simpsons episode I've watched and not laughed at least once. And there are sitcoms I like and have seen the full run of that I would not say that about. So, I am fine with The Simpsons still going. I don't think it's doing any harm to the world. I don't think it's doing any harm to its own legacy. I think it's weird that people are sometimes so bothered by Simpsons still going. Like, you do not have to watch all of it, but if you want more of it, it's there. It's going to have to end at some point, and I do think its end is probably pretty near at this point because the cast is expensive, the TV model is changing, Disney owns Fox, all of that. But I'm fine with Simpsons still going. It at worst it delivers some half-baked yucks into the world every week. I don't know.
Yeah, as someone who doesn't really watch Simpsons, I will say that like I'm happy to have Simpsons exist in a way that like as a comparison, I really wish that South Park was not a thing anymore. I wish that they canceled South Park years ago. Probably when they made the movie. They should have stopped. Like South Park doesn't feel like Simpsons feels like a thing that is like a cultural institution that even if I don't watch it, I'm happy that it just exists out there. It's very much the equivalent of like Japan has a show called Sazae-san that has been going since like the 50s and is the longest running animated show ever and will never be eclipsed because it has so many episodes that Wikipedia doesn't even have the number of episodes of the show on it. It's that kind of thing for me with Simpsons. That it's just like it's just going, right? And like, it should just keep on going forever because why not? It has that quality to it that it's not for me, but I'm happy that it exists.
Yeah, I mean, South Park annoys me that it's still going in that South Park has a very 1990s vision of the world and a very 1990s politics where it is like right down the middle, centrist, but like a belief in centrism that is also nihilistic that says that any strong belief system is wrong. So strong right, strong left, anything people believe in strongly is bad, and caring about things is wrong. And I think every year South Park is on the air, it gets more and more out of having anything useful to say about the world in which we actually live. The early seasons of South Park, one, were just much less topical and political, so they were more fun. But like, it's just a show that is like, I find its brand of like libertarian, anti-everything so obnoxious it drives me insane. Family Guy is also still on the air and should be off because it is bad and racist and stupid. But yeah, Simpsons is not a show with like a central ideology that means that it goes out of style. There are things on The Simpsons that have gone out of style, like Apu, but like, it's not the whole design of the show that feels like this is not for the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I mean with like South Park, that it's like, I think I would be able to feel good about South Park if it was a thing that existed as an artifact of the 90s and stayed there. Because some of its outlook, I mean, not some, like all of its outlook makes sense in the cultural and political context of the 1990s. And it's like, it's fine contained there as a piece of art. And I think I would be able to go back and watch old episodes of South Park and get something from them from that. But the fact that South Park is still going and has not evolved in a way that feels meaningful makes the whole thing feel tainted in such a way that I have no interest in watching it. And this was just the thoughts I had the other day when I saw that they were doing like a big COVID-19 pandemic episode or whatever. I'm like, fuck, they're still doing it, and I wish that they wouldn't, because it does feel like it has hurt, for me personally, the way that show exists at all in like our culture.
Yeah. Okay, Jimmy also asked he actually also asked an Ultraman question, so we pretty much answered that. He had 2 anime questions, and on both of these, I want to say I think the questions slightly mischaracterized like our thoughts, so I wanted to like I'm not being mean or anything. I just think I want to clear the record up. Mm-hmm. So for one, one of his questions is, how come both of you believe that Gohan would not work as a main protagonist after the Cell arc? So he's talking about Dragon Ball Z here. I mean, I know Goku is the cultural icon, but I feel Gohan has the classic superhero everyman quality, sort of like Spider-Man or Kamen Rider. I know for a fact I have never said this, because Gohan is probably my favorite like protagonist character in DBZ. I really like Gohan, and the segment of the post-Cell arc, like the Buu arc, where he is the great Saiyaman and in high school and stuff, that's like only 8 episodes. It's 8 of my favorite episodes of television. I love it. There's always been a part of me that wishes the Buu arc actually invested in Gohan as a hero. I think it was one of the weaknesses of that arc. The thing I like about the Buu arc is that it is completely off the walls and pulled from the id of Akira Toriyama and is so improvisational, and I find it entertaining in that way. But no, I've never thought it would like inherently Gohan couldn't have worked. I think there's something to the fact that it's hard to do Dragon Ball without Goku, because Goku is such a unique special character who is the engine that drives that show. But I do not. I know that is a popular opinion about Gohan. I don't agree with it.
So I think if I'm to guess where this question comes from, I feel like for me there is a, particularly in the Western Dragon Ball fan base, there's like a really strong like people hate the Buu arc specifically because there's this whole mythology that is made up that is like not accurate to the actual creation of Dragon Ball Z, that Toriyama had always planned for Gohan to become the hero, and that's why he killed Goku off, and then people forced him to put Goku back in with the Buu stuff, and that's not true. That is just fan rumors, effectively, from the 90s in the Western Dragon Ball fan base. But though that feeling has like persisted in the Western Dragon Ball fan base in a way that like I am very resistant to, that has then pushed into Dragon Ball Super and people like really hating where Gohan goes as a character, particularly in Super, of him. He's not really a fighter and all that kind of stuff. And I'm very happy having Gohan be happy, right? Like I'm very satisfied with where the character went, and the character arc ultimately settling on Gohan isn't Goku. Gohan's character is not the guy who, you know, he has this moment of profound heroism that is characterized through fighting Cell, but the point of Gohan and the point of what all the fighting that all the characters go through all the time is for Gohan to be able to be a scholar, because that is what he has wanted to be ever since he was a little kid. And it's creating this like world of peace that he gets to pursue that. And like, I think that is where I'm guessing this comes from, is I believe we talked about that when we talked about Dragon Ball Super, and being really happy that that's where they went with Gohan, rather than him being a replacement Goku who just goes out and fights the villain each time.
Yes, I agree. Like, I guess what I would say is I think in the Buu arc, it is like, because the Buu arc is all over the map, it is a little awkward how Gohan is prominent and then sidelined. But I think actually this is one of the things I really value about Dragon Ball Super, is I think it retroactively makes that better by having Gohan feel like he actually did a character transformation and became a person, and like is his own distinct human being from Goku and has his own place in the world. And sometimes that means he's just not on the show, and sometimes that means he has a interesting, unique role as a fighter, like in the Universe Survival arc. But I like that they let Gohan grow up and change, and that I think it like affirms what happens with him in the Buu arc in a really interesting way. And you know, I'm not convinced Toriyama even ever planned on Gohan being like a main character for long, because if you just look at the manga, the number of chapters between Goku dies and Goku is talking through Uranai Baba saying, I'm coming back for the tournament, it's a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Like, in publication time. Like, I don't think Toriyama ever planned on taking Goku off the map long term. Goku's back, it's fine. I think the Buu arc is kind of like the Return of the Jedi of Dragon Ball, in that it is the most inconsistent part of the series, but it also has some of the absolute highest highs in all of it. Vegeta's Majin Vegeta turn and death, the final fight with Kid Buu and Hercule, Mr. Satan getting all of the energy together for the Spirit Bomb, some of the fights, like it's an incredible stretch of the series. It's also got some weird lows here and there, but yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I think we both agree that it's like, I think Gohan absolutely could have been the main character. But like, I think the mythology that like that was always the plan, and it would have been so much better if you'd gone that way. I think that is like a fan theory that got built up a lot.
Yes.
I think is like not accurate to what the show is really doing in the Buu arc. Whether you like the Buu arc or hate it, like it was never going to be the Gohan show. That was not what the plan was.
No. All right. This last question we get every time we open up for questions. I get this from someone, and so I don't know if we're going to answer it anymore, but I do want to address it one more time. He says, how come you were more harsh towards the treatment of female characters, gender politics in Evangelion, but not in other works? I mean, Gundam is not exactly perfect with its female characters, even with Tomino, and he cites Rekoa in Zeta and the Shrike team in Victory. And there's a lot to say here, but I will say my basic example of why are we more harsh towards Eva is the same reason why, if you are a balanced journalist right now, you would be more harsh towards Donald Trump than Joe Biden. It's because one of them is worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I think don't want to reiterate everything we've said in that podcast. And you're obviously free to disagree with us on this. But I think, like, for me, a lot of it comes down to, like, the basic framing, by which I mean the literal, like, physical image framing of characters tells you so much of what you need to know, in the way that Eva cannot help but to repeatedly and constantly and insistently sexualize all of its female characters in any scene that they appear in, which, like, hurts any of its ability to look at gender stuff in a critical way. And with Tomino, like, Tomino is not perfect on gender stuff. He's far from that. Like, we've talked about a lot, like, and I would actually say, like, some of these examples, like, of Rekoa and the Shrike team aren't really, to me, what, like, the problems with Tomino. I think the problems with Tomino come from a lot of, like, the tropes and archetypes that he fits female characters into repeatedly, and becomes very obvious upon watching all of his stuff. And it's the, like, Lala Soon new type woman who has to die to give the male love interest character, like, his next big push in his character development. That, to me, like, is the weakest part of Tomino's writing with women, and it's why, like, some of his later stuff, like Turn A, is so good. Is I feel like he learns a lot from the mistakes he had in writing women throughout his earlier stuff. But even when his gender stuff isn't good in old Gundam, the thing that we always talk about is that it feels like he is always self-critical and complicates his own ways that he's portraying things. And so that's why in, like, Zeta, you have a wide, massive range of different female characters that are unique and have different perspectives and different fates and do different things, are on different sides of the conflict. Like, Reko is one of, like, the most interesting ones, and one of the more complex characters in that sense. And so the fact that Tomino has all these different female characters and has a huge cast of characters means that way less weight is put onto any individual character, so that even if he has these tropes that I think have a lot of negative elements to them in terms of gender stereotyping that he repeats, he always will have other characters that counter that trope, like a Katejina-san from Victory Gundam or something like that. That means the weight is put off of those characters, whereas with Eva, the ways that women are poorly represented is so omnipresent across every single female character that, to me, Anno doesn't get that sort of credit for that show.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I would say, I actually think Rekoa is one of the more, in a way, progressive characters in Gundam, because it is a woman who is allowed to be evil for complicated and inscrutable reasons. I would also put Katejina in that category, in something that feels like it's a breakage of a trope, in that I do not think female antagonists who start in a good place are generally depicted with that level of complexity. I think the Shrike team. I mean, I'll say in our Zeta discussions and our Victory discussions, we talk about all of this at length,
Yeah.
and I actually think what they do with the Shrike team is also really interesting. The thing I have a problem with in Victory is the weird bikini women in that one bad episode later in the series. But like, in more general senses, I will also say, even if like he's using tropes we don't love, Tomino also is really good at viewing women as individual human beings in his work who have like individuality and interiority in a way I think a lot of anime and a lot of just writing by men is bad at, and I think it is consistent across his stuff. It's very rare that I watch a Tomino show and feel like this female character is underbaked in a way that feels sexist to me, whereas like, I just do think Eva has it so constantly undercuts its own ability to build interesting characters out of its women, because they are either, it is just constant fan service, or it is blatant violent misogyny as an end of Evangelion. There's no other word for it. That does not mean I think Hideaki Anno as a person hates women. I think his work, though, gets into, in that film, a dark misogynistic place where brutal violence is visited upon all of them by men in a way that feels like biblical in its aspersions.
That the male characters are also like immune to, right? Like the way that it's presented
Yeah.
is so different, and I think that that's another thing that Tomino. Not to say that it's like 100% the same, because again, I'm not saying that he's perfect on gender stuff, but I think he's way better at using the like wide cast of characters he has more in a more egalitarian sense than that of just like the way
Yes.
that violence is portrayed against women in Eva is starkly different than it is against Shinji or Kaji or like the handful of male characters in that show.
Yeah, very true. And, mostly I would say I think we cover this pretty well on Weekly Suit Gundam. So, yeah, that's why.
Yep.
All right. Last question by Jimmy. I will just go quickly on. He asked me, why do I hate both Jean-Luc Godard and Francois Truffaut? Why not give Truffaut a pass? Because people generally like his stuff more. And I will just say quickly, because I know this is not for everyone, not everyone cares. I think Francois Truffaut is so far up his own ass, I could never even identify his head. He cites the 400 Blows here. I am one of the few people immune to the charms of the 400 Blows. I think that's about a sad French boy who does not have as much reason to be sad as he thinks he does. And Truffaut's other movies drive me up a wall. Jules and Jim is so up its own ass. It is so pretentious. It is so long. It is just like... I'm sorry, I see a lot of Godard and Truffaut's early stuff, and I see kids playing with a movie camera thinking they are men who write about movies, and I see, like, the dudes on Twitter who, like, say very declarative things about film without as much film knowledge as they think they have, and I feel a lot of that in their stuff, and I know I am on an absolute island in film studies on this, but I do not hate Truffaut the way I hate Godard. I'm just immune to his charms, I think. I hate Godard. I think Godard's a bad filmmaker. But yeah, that's my thoughts. So little spice, little film studies spice there,
Yeah,
Sean.
some hot film studies drama.
Okay, so we had a question from a guy named Snakes Plus Plane. This will not be on your outline, Sean. Have you two ever done a review or deep dive of Lost? I'm currently rewatching it and super curious what your takes would be and are. So funnily enough, I got my start writing about TV with Lost. When I had my blog on the Denver Post back in the day, I blogged every episode of seasons 4, 5, and 6. I do not believe those are still online, and I'm not going to share those pieces because they're from when I was like 16 and 17, and I don't like them. I love Lost. It was really important to me. I have not rewatched it since it went off the air, so it's been like 10 years now. At some point, I do want to watch it again. I think it is a show that is in many ways from another era, but I still have affection for a lot of it. I'm not someone who hated the finale. I liked the finale, although I think the final season as a whole is weak. But there's a lot, like Lost is really important to me and to like my development and taste. So it's a show that has a lot of stuff I love. I think Damon Lindelof's subsequent stuff has been even better and eclipsed it for me, like The Leftovers especially, but also Watchmen, which just won a shit ton of Emmys deservedly. So yeah, Damon Lindelof is one of my favorite people working in film or television, is one thing I would say.
Yeah, for me, Lost is not like one of my favorite shows, and I never finished watching it. I think I watched up until the last season, because it was one of those classic, like, oh, this show's really popular, and I kind of waited a long time to start watching it, and then I finally gave in. It did the exact same thing with Breaking Bad, and I was like, oh, I'll just start watching it now. And then over the course of like a year, slowly caught up. And then by the time I caught up, one, I stopped liking the show because I remember the last season that I watched, which I'm pretty sure was the second to last season.
Season 5.
Yeah, I thought the show had kind of lost itself by that point. And I didn't particularly like it. I remember particularly feeling like, because that's the one that it ends on like the cliffhanger with like a nuclear bomb that goes off or something, right?
That's the time travel season, and then it ends with the Jughead bomb going off.
Yeah, and I just remember having a very stark, like, jump the shark feeling at that point of, like, I think the show has lost track of why it was good earlier on. And then by that point, the final season had not started airing yet, and so I didn't move on to the final season. And then by the time that had finished airing, I'm like, I think I'm good. I don't actually want to watch this show. But the first few seasons of Lost, I remember really liking. And I've always felt like Lost had such a great ensemble cast of characters in the early season structure of having individual episodes diving into the past of individual characters, and it was like really focused on that. I always thought that was really great and a really good structure for the show. And then, but everyone, it felt like in the Lost community really grabbed onto the dumb mystery stuff, which I never thought was like that great. And then the show slowly got consumed by the weird esoteric sci-fi part of it, and the character drama part of it slowly started to die. And then I think the great irony was that then when the last season happened, it sounded like they abandoned some of like the esoteric sci-fi shit and really grabbed back onto, and let's do like the characters justice and kind of not give answers to all these dumb questions that didn't matter, but like focus in on the characters again. And then everyone hated it because the show had changed, or like what they were interested in was not what the show was doing anymore. And I found that weird to watch from the outside in.
So I actually think your diagnosis is mostly right, and I'll just say the thing is I actually disagree about the final season. The final season is way too heavy on the esoteric mystery stuff. Okay. Like the weirdest complaint about Lost to me has always been it didn't answer enough questions. The worst part of the final season is how much time it spends trying to explain things that should have been left unexplained. The single worst episode of Lost is the anti-penultimate episode, Across the Sea, which is about the origin story of Jacob and the Man in Black, and it's literally 50 minutes of exposition ticking off all the boxes of backstory about the island and about the smoke monster and about everything. It is like the FAQ of Lost, and it is an abysmal episode of television. Damon Lindelof himself, like a week after it aired, said that's my least favorite episode. Like there was never like any bones about it. And so I think there were a lot of people in the Lost fan community who just were never going to be satisfied by any of it. And I always have thought the last season needed to do more of getting back to basics. And I think the finale is really good. I think a lot of the final season I think it's the worst season of the show. It's really rough. I think the first season of the show is the best. Damon Lindelof has always said that's the best season of TV he ever made. I think he has since eclipsed that, but I understand why he says that. The first season of Lost is really fucking good.
Yeah.
I think the second season is really good. I think the third season, the first half is kind of bad, and then the second half is great. I think season 4 is great, and then I think season 5 gets kind of up its own ass with the time travel stuff. Some of that I like, some of it I don't, and then I think season 6 is rough. And I do think, Sean, your diagnosis about them kind of being forced down the sci-fi weird path did hurt it. And I think you see, like, The Leftovers is almost a direct response to that, in that The Leftovers is a show about mysteries that are too big to ever be solved. Like, it is about existential mysteries, and that it just is a character piece.
And there's a reason why Leftovers is only 3 seasons, right, as opposed to a 6-season monstrosity, because Lost obviously would never, like, what it was good at could not be supported over that length of time. So it's like, I don't even blame the show for getting bad, because I don't know how it could have maintained the quality level, because it's not been X-Files or something like that, where it's just like an ever-renewable premise. It's like it had to stop.
I mean, Sean, the first season of Lost is 25 episodes. Yeah. Like, the first 3 seasons of Lost were all standard 24-episode seasons, and then they got a little shorter, but they were still like 16 to 18 episodes. Nobody makes shows that long anymore. That's part of it, is that Lost is literally from another era. Lost could not be made that way today because nobody makes shows with that many episodes in America today, especially big, dramatic, serialized stories. No one does that.
And you have now identified the #1 reason why I will never rewatch Lost, because there's way too fucking much of it.
Yes. Yeah. All right. And finally, Vang with 2 Gs asked, what comes out first, the Flash movie or the Uncharted movie? 2 movies in development hell we have famously talked about many times on the show, Sean. And I have an answer. It will be the Uncharted movie. Because, Sean, did you know the Uncharted movie is in the middle of principal photography right now as we're speaking?
You're lying to me.
It is directed by Ruben Fleischer, who did Zombieland and Venom. It is starring Tom Holland. There are on-set pictures of Tom Holland as Nathan Drake, little baby Nathan Drake, and Mark Wahlberg as Sully. They did it. They cast Mark Wahlberg as Sully. Antonio Banderas is the villain. That's the only thing that sounds good. They did briefly have to shut down because Antonio Banderas got COVID, but they are back at it. They are shooting it. It is a real thing. The Uncharted movie will be first because that Flash movie is still in development. It is not cast. It is not in front of a camera. I think the Flash movie will happen. They have gotten a writer in Christina Hodson and a director in I forget his name. Andy Muschietti, who did It, who WB is like very hot on. They really like these people, which shows that they're serious for the first time about a Flash movie. But no, the Uncharted movie is happening, and it is seemingly happening in the absolute worst version of itself. Like, Sean, how far into development hell do you have to go? How hard do you have to lose the forest for the trees to think that the way to get people into the theater for an Uncharted movie is to do a prequel origin story young Nathan Drake movie with Mark fucking Wahlberg as Sully? You are so far off from, like, already Uncharted is a video game. It does not have big buy-in purchase with a movie audience, but like to do it one step beyond and like, okay, you have to know what Uncharted is enough to want to go see the prequel. What the, like, it's one of the best stories I've ever seen of like development hell twisting in such a way that you are so far away from what you ever intended to make, and it's going to please absolutely nobody. Also, again, Marky Mark as Sully, that might be the worst casting I've ever heard of.
I'm just going to say, Jonathan, you gave some very compelling reasons for your answer to this question. I'm going to say that neither of these movies are going to come out. I refuse to believe it. It's never going to happen. Marky Mark isn't even a human being. I don't know who that is. I don't know who you're talking about. It's just these aren't cogent words are not coming out of your mouth, Jonathan. I think maybe the call's breaking up or something because it's just nonsense. Neither of these movies are going to come out. They'll never come out. And we just have to accept that.
All right, I think that's a good place to end. Thank you guys for all the listener mail. If you ever want to get in touch with us, please go ahead and get in touch with us on Twitter. I'm at Jonathan Lack. He is at Sean the Chapman, because you are the Chap Man.
It is true. I am.
Yeah, just look for the Hatsune Miku avatar. You can visit us at weeklystuffpodcast.com. We're going to be starting an OnlyFans soon. The OnlyFans will be Sean posting sexy Hatsune Miku pictures that he got from the dancing game. Mm-hmm. So there might be a copyright issue there, but we're going to try it, see how it goes.
Have I teleported to another world? Is this a world where the Uncharted movie comes out? Is the Lost thing happening? Do I have to set off a nuclear bomb? I don't want to be in the world where the Uncharted movie comes out. I want to go back, Jonathan. I want to go back.